Will the members and our guests please take their seats? This meeting will now come to order. As all members have received a copy of the call of tonight's meeting, the reading of the call will be omitted. Will everyone please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As all members have received a copy of the minutes of our January 23 meeting, the reading of the minutes will be omitted. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March meeting of the Greenwich Representative Town Meeting. My name is Tom Byrne, RTM moderator. Is Marilyn Adelberg here? Marilyn?
Mr. Moderator, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Greenwich, I am pleased to present to the RTM this evening a new copy of the 2006-2007 RTM Directory. I would also like to thank Beacon Point Marine and the Greenwich Water Club for once again underwriting the printing costs. Everyone should have received these directories in the mail. If you didn't, you can contact the League, and we certainly will get you more. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mrs. Adelberg. That's a... And also thank you to Joan Caldwell, who was our liaison in this effort of coordinating all the information so we could get that booklet out timely. Thank you very much to the League and to Marilyn Adelberg. All right. Based on the reports of the committees and districts that we received, I notified the district and committee chairs that the consensus that I will be designating based on those reports the following items for our consent calendar. Those are items, I'll read them briefly and then go back because if they remain on our consent calendar, we will not hear any committee reports or any discussion of the items. But the consent items that I will designate are items 8 through 12, 16, 17, 19, 21, and 24 through 26. So, beginning with item 8. Item 8 is the nomination by our Appointments Committee of the following members to serve as members of the RTM Claims Committee: Michael Barnaby, Robert Bierman, Edward Didakis, Brian Faro, Randall Huffman, Lloyd Hull, Richard Landis, Edward Manganello, and David Mellick. And the term of that committee is for the balance of this RTM term. However, Claims Committee members continue to serve until replaced if they continue to be RTM members. Item 9, also designated for the consent calendar. That is the nomination by our Appointments Committee of the following members to serve as members of our Labor Contracts Committee, also for the balance of the term: James Boutell, Robert Burns, Joan Caldwell, David Detchen, and Richard Grebe. Item 10 is the nomination by the Appointments Committee again of the following members to serve as alternate members of the Labor Contracts Committee: Joshua Brown and Michael Warner. Item 11 is the nomination by the Board of Selectmen of Jim Dane to serve as a member of the Alarm Appeals Board for a term expiring March 31, 2010. Item 12 is the nomination of Robert Fogg to be a member of the Alarm Appeals Board for a term expiring March 31, 2010. Item 16 is the nomination of David Ormsby to be a member of the Nathaniel Witherell Board with a term expiring March 31, 2009. Item 17 is the nomination of Fifi Phyllis Sheridan to be a member of the Historic District Commission with a term expiring March 31, 2011. Item 19 is the nomination of Robert Carangelo to be a member of the Board of Health with a term expiring March 31, 2010. Item 21 is the nomination of Richard Maitland to be a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission with a term expiring March 31, 2009. Item 24 is the nomination of Mary Hike to be a member of the Board of Social Services with a term expiring March 31, 2009. Item 25 is the nomination of Arthur Delmhorst to be a member of the Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals with a term expiring March 31, 2010. And the last item that I'm designating for our consent calendar is the nomination of Robert Burns to be a member of the Southwestern Regional Planning Agency with a term expiring March 31, 2007. Now, pursuant to our rules, if there is any objection, if those items remain on our consent calendar, we will hear no committee reports and we will have no debate on those items, and we will immediately proceed to vote. If there is an objection that is supported by 20 or more members of any item being placed on that calendar, the item will be taken off the consent calendar. So, is there any objection to items 8 through 12, 16, 17, 19, 21, and 24 through 26 being placed on our consent calendar? Dr. Carlson, District 1. All right. Dr. Carlson of District 1 has objected to the placement of the nomination of Richard Maitland. This is item 21. The nomination of Richard Maitland to be a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission with a term expiring March 31, 2009. All those who support Dr. Carlson's objection, please rise. There being less than 20 supporters of that objection has failed. Are there any further objections to the designated items for our consent calendar? Hearing none, will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Consent calendar, items 8 through 12, 16, 17, 19, 21, 24 through 26. And please proceed to poll your delegation. Now, we had a total of 26 items on our call. I am informed that 2 of those items have been withdrawn. Those are items 13 and 14. So those will not come before us tonight. With respect to the remaining items on our call, there was a consensus that 5 of those remaining items could be combined for voting purposes. It requires a motion to suspend the rules to combine items for voting purposes. So it is my recommendation, based on the reports received, that we combine items 1, 3, 4, 18, and 20 for voting purposes. Is there such a motion to suspend the rules? It has been moved and seconded to suspend the rules to combine items 1, 3, 4, 18, and 20 for voting purposes. The motion to suspend the rules is not debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of combining items 1, 3, 4, 18, and 20 for voting purposes, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried, which means we will begin with those combined items, and that leaves to be considered separately items 2, 5, 6, and 7, 15, 22, and 23. All right? Now, before I call for item number 1, the first of the combined items, Robert Tuthill of District 3 has asked to be recognized. Could you just come up so that everyone, both in the hall and at home, can hear the motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move to limit debate to 3 minutes per speaker per motion, with the exception of the principal proponent and opponent to be determined by the moderator would be given 10 minutes each. Thank you.
All right, and that would apply to all items coming before us from this point forward. Is there a second to that motion? It has been moved and seconded to limit debate such that each speaker is limited to 3 minutes per motion per item, with the exception that the proponent and principal opponent, the latter to be determined by the moderator, would have up to 10 minutes to speak on the item. The motion to limit debate is not itself debatable, and it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. All those in favor of Mr. Tuthill's motion to limit debate, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion has carried. So that limit is now in effect for the balance of the meeting. All right, item number 1 now comes before us. May we have the resolution on that? Dr. Susan Wallerstein of the Greenwich Public Schools.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Members of the RTM, resolved that the Town of Greenwich accept the donation from the Glenville PTA and Glenville Child Care not to exceed $67,000, said sum to be appropriated to account Z6801792 59830 Glenville Playground and Sign, for the purchase and installation of replacement and supplemental playground equipment and the purchase and installation of an exterior sign consistent with the executed memoranda of understanding.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 1 has been moved and seconded. Mr. Brady, let me just remind everyone before I call on you for your report. If I know we've just voted, if there is anyone who was not sworn in, either was not in attendance at our January meeting or has not already been sworn in tonight, please come forward and our town clerk will administer the oath before you vote tonight. Robert Brady with the report of our Education Committee on item number 1.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members, guests. The Education Committee met last Monday night to consider this item, a $67,000 gift for playground equipment, a gift of the Glenville PTA and the Glenville Child Care. Drs. Leverett and Wallerstein and Ms. Giambo, Chairman of the Board of Education, were there to assist, together with Lisa Harkness, who's the PTA president. In the last 6 months, we've had 3 gifts for playground equipment come before us. The last 2 were for Coscob and Julian Curtis, each of which were supplements to town appropriations to upgrade the equipment at those schools to the Board of Education standards. In this case, we're not being asked to accept a gift for supplementary equipment. Last fall, the equipment at Glenville was noted to be hazardous, and upon inspection by Parks and Recreation, which is the department responsible for the operation and maintenance of playground equipment, was determined to be unsafe and was removed. As the PTA president said, the children got to watch the bulldozer come in and rip the stuff out, take it away. And then nothing reappeared, and that was last fall. The word standard applies because the Board of Education is in the process, does have and is in the process of upgrading standards for playground equipment. What should an elementary school have given the population, the grade mix, and one thing and another? It's part of the town infrastructure, similar to boilers and roofs and other stuff. In this case, the Board of Ed elected to not go to the town tax levy to obtain funds. Perhaps serendipitously, whatever, the Glenville PTA and Glenville Child Care were both interested in seeing this playground recommissioned quickly. They had money available. They offered it to the Board of Education. The Board of Education, as one member put it, opportunistically took it. We had a lengthy discussion last Monday night, not over whether we should have playground equipment at Glenville and whether it should be safe. We were all unanimously in favor of that, as I think that probably a shared opinion here. We are very concerned, however, that when we accept gifts from whether they be PTAs or other agencies for what are in effect core services in our schools or elsewhere in town for that matter, we run the risk of creating an inequitable system. Equity has been an issue within the dealing with the Board of Education for some time. There is, I think we all understand, there are disparities between different parts of town in their ability to come up with contributions to do extra things for their schools. It's great to have supplemental stuff. Wonderful for the kids. But we should not be relying upon charity to fund the core services at the schools. That was the crux of the discussion. As part of the discussion, we considered and rejected a resolution to amend this to strip out the $60,000. The people that represented the children were very anxious to get this done, and there were concerns expressed that the Board of Estimate and Taxation would not be able to respond by the April meeting and perhaps would not respond favorably to this, and that the playground would go without stuff. As a consequence, that motion was rejected. On the main motion, on the resolution as presented, we did vote 11 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstentions, to recommend adoption of this. There were several people on the committee which basically said to the Board of Ed, don't bring anything like this back to us again. We do not want to see gifts funding core services. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Frederick, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Thank you. We met Monday, March 6th. The item was presented by Dr. Larry Leverett, Superintendent. The Glenville PTA and Glenville Child Care are seeking approval to donate $60,000 for play equipment and $7,000 for an exterior building sign. This item resulted from an audit that was conducted by the Park and Rec, whereby unsafe playground equipment was removed in the fall. Since the audit was conducted after the CIP process, it was not considered for the upcoming budget. Although all agreed in the meeting, as Mr. Brady presented, that it is not the Board of Ed, that it is the Board of Ed and the town's role to supply this equipment, this was considered an emergency and is badly needed for the K through 3 grades, who are now without play equipment, who are now and have been without play equipment. Therefore, the PTA, Glenville PTA, reordered their priorities and made, in order to make this contribution. The funds come from a $35,000 surplus that's in the Glenville Child Care's budget and $25,000 from the Glenville PTA budget. The $7,000 for the sign had been previously committed and reserved by the PTA. The PTA is working in conjunction with the Building Committee and Parks and Rec and target mid-May installation if this is approved. The sign was not approved by the P&Z Architectural Review and has been tabled pending an alternative design. Approval of the concept is therefore sought from the RTM subject to all required permits. This was approved by the Board of Ed outside of the gift cap. 10 districts were present at the Finance Committee meeting. We voted 10-0-0 in favor of this item. Districts 4 and 9 were absent. Paul Curtis was away presenting item 5 and joined the meeting later. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Zarilli, Vice Chair of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Sue Wallerstein came before the Parks and Rec last Tuesday evening. She presented the information on the playground. As previously reported from the Education and Finance Committees, and I don't feel a need to belabor the great reports they gave, the Parks and Rec Committee voted 12-0-0, and we were very excited about getting the equipment for the children who don't have any at the moment.
Thank you. Discussion on item 1. Mr. Boutel, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, given the report by Mr. Brady on behalf of the Education Committee, and so that our appropriation accurately reflects what we're being required to spend this money for, I move we strike the words "and supplemental."
Is there a second? This is a motion to amend item 1 to delete the words "and supplemental," which appear in the 4th line of the call. It has been moved and seconded to amend item 1 to delete the words "and supplemental" from the resolution. Discussion on Mr. Boutel's motion to amend. Okay. We can adopt amendments. Is there any objection to this? We can adopt motions by unanimous consent if there is no objection. If there is any objection, we will proceed to vote. This needs to be one objection. Is there any objection to Mr. Boutel's? Yes, there is. All right. Is there any discussion, any further discussion on Mr. Boutel's motion to amend item 1? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Boutel, motion to amend item 1, and proceed to poll your delegation. Now, we can proceed. What I will do, this is not a vote on item number 1. This is merely a motion to amend it. Item 1 is still combined with 3, 4, 18, and 20. So we are merely voting whether to remove those 2 words. If that motion carries, we will, well, what I suggest we do is continue. If there's no further discussion on item 1 as a whole, we'll move to the next combined item. And when we have the results of the motion to amend, which we should have before we reach the end of the combined items, if there's a need to come back to item 1 for debate, we can do that. All right? So, any further discussion on item number 1? Item number 3 now will come before us, but before I do that, I'll invite our first selectman, Jim Lash, to introduce a new member of the town force.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. It's nice to be with you this evening. Congratulations to all of you who are new and renewed members. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce Mr. Lloyd Hubbs to you. Mr. Hubbs, as many of you know, is the new Public Works Commissioner for the town of Greenwich. Lloyd, if you might stand for a second. No, not the shorter one. Sit down, Penny. Lloyd comes to us, as many of you know, from California. He's had his first snow, so he knows how that works now. We're very fortunate to have Lloyd. His entire career has been in public works. He has seen all of the kinds of issues that we have, from the development of the most basic public services, such as sewage treatment plants and highways, to the more complex buildings and construction projects. And I can tell you that he's off to a quick start. He and I have had a couple of very comprehensive meetings already, and he's catching on very quickly. So I hope you'll all get to know him and enjoy having him with us. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you very much.
All right, item number 3, our next item is a Public Works item, and it turns out Mr. Comm will present this to us. Bob Comm, Deputy Commissioner, Public Works.
Good evening. Item number 3, resolve that the sum of $170,000 be, and the same is hereby appropriated to be added to Sewer Maintenance Fund account number J361-59650-26122, known as Force Main Reconstruction.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Item number 3 has been moved and seconded. Pamela Frederick with the report of our Finance Committee.
This item was presented by Bob Comm. The request stems from an emergency sewer break that occurred at a critical force main that affects approximately one-third of homes east of the Mianas, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. The break resulted from poor original construction, which dates back to the 1960s, where the main was placed on a concrete stump. 4 of 29 pump stations feed into this force main. A cost that was questioned during the meeting was the sewer department's overtime. This was not already in the operating budget, and there were no other operating funds available in the budget. Public Works used money in the budget reserved for consent decree projects which must be replaced. The committee questioned whether the department could identify where there may be similar construction of this type that might occur. Deputy Commissioner Comm indicated that this was not possible. It would require excavation. So that's it for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Finance Department voted 10-0-0 in favor. Districts 4 and 9 were absent.
Thank you. Gerald Isaacson, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. Health and Human Services was not able to handle this item at our regular Tuesday meeting, so we met just a few minutes ago before this meeting started. I think it's been covered very well. One thing that did come up was that this problem existed for really only 2 days, which is quite amazing given the scope of the issue. Health and Human Services voted 12-0-0.
Thank you. Robert Kavee, Chair of our Public Works Committee.
Item 3 was presented by Bob Comm, DPW Deputy Commissioner, with Lloyd Hubbs, our new DPW Commissioner, in attendance. A 24-foot section of 24-inch cast iron force main suffered a 15-foot longitudinal crack as a result of a point load through direct contact with a concrete storm drain below the force main. The force main was more than 40 years old, and apparently contractor's liability was no longer covered by the installer contractor's performance bond. Namely, the pipe should not have been resting on a rigid surface. The DPW Sewer Division avoided penalties by promptly notifying regulatory agencies, installing emergency bypass pumping and chemical treatment, and initiating contractor repairs. The RTM Public Works Committee voted 10 in favor, none against, with District 4 abstaining because he was late following attendance at a conflicting town meeting. District 9 was absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 3. Item number 4 now comes before us. Dr. Wallerstein with that resolution.
Thank you. Resolved that the sum of $13,000 be and is hereby appropriated to be added to account A650-1792-54050, maintenance of buildings, said appropriation to come from fund balance.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 4 has been moved and seconded. Bob Brady with the report of our Education Committee.
Good evening again. We met with Mr. Byrne last Monday night on this item. The discussion was brief. Basically, a sewer line which runs from the back of Havermeyer was invaded by roots. It was blocked. It had to be excavated, removed, and replaced. And during that time, there was a separate bypass line to route sewage around it put in place. Our vote was 12-0-0 to recommend this item.
Thank you. Jerry Isaacson with the report of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM, this was an item where we had no report from the Board of Education. We just weren't able to coordinate our schedules, but the work had already been done, and the item was relatively small, so we decided to go ahead with just what was in the explanatory notes, and our vote was 12-0-0.
Thank you. Bob Cavee with the report of our Public Works Committee.
Item 4 was presented by Tony Byrne, Board of Ed Facility Manager, with Sue Wallerstein, Assistant Superintendent of the Board of Ed, in attendance. Here again, the DPW provided diagnosis and bypass pumping. The appropriation of $13,000 to the Board of Ed building maintenance account, and that was confusing on the call because DPW has a building maintenance account too, covered costs for excavation and sewer line replacement to the extent that they exceeded budget funds. No overall estimate was given for the total expense. 9 in favor. The Public Works Committee voted 9 in favor, none opposed, with District 3 abstaining because he was attending an RTM appointments interview. District 4 and 9 were absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 4. The next of our combined items is item 18. Peter Crumbine, Selectman. Okay.
Good evening. I'm going to handle both numbers 18 and 20 in the combined items, and both of them have slight changes from what's on your call. 18 should read, resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be reappointed an alternate member of the Historic District Commission for a term expiring 3/31/11. So she is just being renominated as she's an alternate already. And item number 20, resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed member of the Planning and Zoning Commission for a term expiring 3/31/07. Donald Heller, he'll be taking an unexpired term which ends in 07. His current term as alternate ends in 08. That's why there was some confusion on that matter. And otherwise, it's as in your call.
All right, we'll take these one at a time. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution on item 18? The resolution on item 18 has been moved and seconded. Colleen Jenkins with the report of our Appointments Committee.
Item 18, Joan Murphy. The vote of the Appointments Committee was 11-0-0. Had the error not existed, this would have been on the consent calendar. Thank you.
Franklin Bloomer with our Land Use Committee report.
Our vote was 10 in favor, none opposed, with no abstentions. Districts 1 and 2 absent.
All right. Any discussion on item 18? Item 20 now comes before us. We've had the resolution described. Will the member please move the adoption of resolution number 20? The resolution on item 20 has been moved and seconded. Colleen Jenkins.
The vote on Donald Heller was 11-0-0. Once again, had the error not existed, this would have been a consent item. Thank you.
Mr. Bloomer.
The Land Use Committee met with Mr. Heller only this evening. Our vote was 10 in favor, none opposed, with no abstentions. Districts 2 and 11 absent.
Thank you. Discussion on item 20. All right, that now brings us to the end of our combined calendar. I have the results of the vote on Mr. Boutel's motion to amend item number 1, the first of the combined items. This was to delete the words "and supplemental" from the resolution. Those in favor, 109. Opposed, 64. Abstaining, 3. That item has carried. Item 1 is now before us in its amended form. Is there any need to have discussion go back to item 1? Okay. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Combined items 1, 3, 4, 18, and 20, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the result of the vote on our consent calendar items. Those were items 8 through 12, 16, 17, 19, 21, 24 through 26. Those in favor, 170. Opposed, 1. Abstaining, 1. The consent calendar items have carried. And I neglected to ask for any corrections or additions to our minutes of the January 23 meeting. Are there any changes suggested to those minutes? Hearing none and absent objection, the minutes as submitted stand adopted upon unanimous consent. That now brings us to the first of our separate items, which is item number 2. May we have that resolution? Al Cava, Director of Labor Relations.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, good evening. Item number 2, resolve that the sum of $45,000 for the fiscal year 2005-2006 being the same is hereby appropriated to carry out the terms of the negotiated 2-year collective bargaining agreement between the Town of Greenwich and Laborers International Union of North America, Local 136, AFL-CIO. Further resolved, the representative town meeting of the Town of Greenwich hereby approves such provisions of the agreement, if any, which may be in conflict with any charter provision, special act, ordinance, rule, or regulation of the Town of Greenwich with the meaning of Connecticut General Statute, Section 7474. Thank you.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 2 has been moved and seconded. May we have the reports of the committees that considered this? We will begin with Joan Caldwell, Chair of our Labor Contracts Committee.
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, the settlement before us, as Mr. Cava has indicated, is between the town, Greenwich, and Laborers International of North America, LIUNA, representing 192 budgeted and filled middle management positions. These are our town professionals and technological staff. Until recently, the Directors of Conservation, Inland Wetlands, and the Purchasing Department were also members of this group, but they have been decertified and moved into the top management group, which we refer to as Management Confidential. Thus, our head count is, without those 3, 192. The settlement is for a 2-year period, from July 1st, 05, last July, through June 30th, 07. Almost 9 months of the contract term have expired. We have not seen many retroactive agreements in recent years. The town has worked very hard to bring settlements to us in a timely fashion for the sake of the morale of the employees and also for budgeting purposes. This contract is late getting to us, however. If you will recall, when we reported to you on GMEA and the Teamsters contract this past fall, we indicated that the town had put on the table with both of these groups, and also with LIUNA, a change in the pension program from the old plan, which we refer to as defined contributions, to a new program called defined benefits, to a new program called defined contribution. We were successful with GMEA and with Teamsters in getting that change to the pension program, as it will affect new hires. We were not successful with LIUNA. Throughout the late spring, early summer, there were discussions going on between the parties. It is the committee's understanding that the LIUNA membership was almost evenly divided between those who were willing to accept the change as it would affect new hires and those who did not wish to. In the end, as the day ended, after months of discussion, the members of the union who did not want to accept the change were not convinced, and so we lost the vote. Those who wanted the change didn't switch. They decided that as much as they wanted the COLA added to the annual pension benefit they would get, they were not willing to make the change because the union told them that it was unnecessary. They were already getting a pension increase, a cost of living, by virtue of the fact that the Retirement Board and the Board of Estimate and Taxation had given ad hoc increases to pension benefits. The Labor Contracts Committee was not very happy to hear this. In our view, the actions of the Retirement Board and the BET, though unintentionally, did affect the ability of the town to bargain a provision that it felt was in the best interest of the town. You will hear more about this in the coming 6 to 8 weeks as the ad hoc committee on, or as the special committee on ad hoc pension increases reports out. Its work is just about finished. So as I say, you'll be hearing more. And in the meantime, we will be back at the bargaining table with this unit in the fall. Now, with regard to other fixed expenses, pensions being only part of it, the other part being health insurance, the town has for many years been tweaking its health insurance program and its premiums in order to try and contain the increase in cost on health insurance that the whole country is experiencing. In this particular contract, we have been able to do a little more adjusting. For example, those employees who participate in the preferred provider program, health insurance program, will increase the percentage of premium that they pay from 12 to 15%. Those employees who go to the preferred POS program will contribute 12%, and employees who are in either of the two health nets or in a health savings plan will contribute 7%. The 15% contribution for the PPO plan is the highest in the town. It is higher than what the teachers are currently paying. So what we have in effect done, we've raised the ceiling, and the town will continue going in this direction in order to keep up with the escalating costs of health insurance. With regard to the general wage increase, the contract, as you will note from the explanatory items, calls for 3.25% increase in each of the 2 years, except for Nathaniel Witherell employees who, in the second year, have a wage reopener. That reopener, when it's finally settled or negotiated, will come back to the town meeting for approval. There are, of the 192 employees covered by this bargaining unit, 45 that are at Nathaniel Witherell. Now, I mentioned to you that that is a different number than you heard at either of the committees to which the Labor Contracts Committee went. We got to thinking about it, and the number sounded a little strange. Mr. Carver and I spoke this morning and went back over the records, and it turns out that it's not the 70 that I believe was reported at those meetings, but actually 45, half of whom are nurses. The town feels very confident that the salaries being paid to the nurses is comparable to what's being offered elsewhere. The remaining half, however, are salary classifications or jobs for which we are not certain, and so therefore the town has undertaken a salary survey. Once we have the results of that salary survey, then the town will sit down with the union and work out a salary scale for the employees at Nathaniel Witherell. I would also call to your attention, if you look at the call, you will see that you're only being asked to appropriate $45,000, which is a very small sum when you consider the millions of dollars that go to paying the salaries of these employees. The reason for that is that the bulk of the money was incorporated into the May budget, which you passed last year, May '05. And of course, the money for the coming year will appear in the budget, which we are going to act on May 06. The overall cost of this contract for all 192 employees covered was for the base year, the year that just ended June 30th, $19,900,000. In the first year of this contract, it's going to go up with a 3.25% increase to $20,500,000, an increase of 11.3%. In the second year, that number will jump to $21,400,000, an increase of 4.3%. The combined increase for the 2 years is 3.72%. The increases that we have given in this contract are in line with increases that we have been giving to all other town groups. We're right in step with GMEA and Teamsters and the others. The only other provision that I would call to your attention is that we have added for this group of employees, like Teamsters and GMEA, the opportunity to take 4 days of accumulated sick leave for an employee who has reached a maximum of 180 days of accumulated sick leave and hasn't used it. He can take 4 of those days and convert it into 1 vacation day. This works for the town because, you know, there's a natural tendency, if you've got time in the bank, to take a day off. So if we can trade 4 for 1, that's a pretty good deal. The Labor Contracts Committee, by a vote of 5-0, recommends you approve this contract.
Thank you. Pamela Frederick with the report of our Finance Committee.
Thanks. Joan Caldwell's report from the Labor Contracts Committee was quite comprehensive and covered all of the discussion that the Finance Committee held. Our vote was 10-0-0 in favor, with District 4 and 9 absent. District 11 alternate voted in place of the delegate, given the spouse is a LIUNA member. Thanks.
Thank you. Greg Fruman, Chair of our Town Services Committee.
Wow, I follow Joan. There's nothing to say. Town Services took this item up. We voted 11-0-1 in favor of the item. The extension came from District 11 as she's a member of the union. That's it.
Thank you. Discussion on item 2. Mr. Basilevsky, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, I have actually a technical question and a correction. In the second resolution, I believe the word "with" the meaning should be "within" the meaning. However, I have a more serious question, which I would like to ask through you to the Town Council, and that is, I read the second resolution as saying that this contract, notwithstanding any provision of the Charter, overrides the Charter if there is a conflict between the agreement and the Charter. And the question I ask to the Town Council through you, Mr. Moderator, isn't in effect, aren't you creating a charter change by contract, and whether that's in legal order? And I would suggest perhaps that the way out of the problem is to simply delete the second resolution altogether, unless it's a contractual requirement under the labor contracts. But I believe that what you've got there, if you read it at least on its face, implies that the contract, a contractual arrangement, is affecting a charter, potentially affecting a charter change if there is a conflict. Now, if there is no conflict, that particular resolution appears to me to be superfluous.
Okay, well, I will tell you that this is by operation of law. That provision merely reflects state law, which provides that any provision of a collective bargaining agreement does take precedence over the any provision in conflict in a municipal charter. But, Mr. Fox, would you care to respond?
Mr. Moderator, there is nothing that I can add to what you have already said. That is, in fact, the law. That's the way it stands. There is no change or proposed change in the Charter.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 2. All right. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item number 2, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the results of the vote on our combined items. Those were items 1, 3, 4, 18, and 20. Those in favor, 177. Opposed, 1. Abstaining, 0. The combined items have carried. The next separate item to come before us is item number 5, a sense of the meeting resolution from District 9. Betsy Fruman, Chair of District 9.
Item number 5 is a sense of the meeting resolution with regard to the Bentheim Western Greenwich Civic Center. It is as it appears in the call, with the now therefore be it resolved that it is the sense of the meeting that the RTM endorses the original stated purpose of the Bentheim Western Greenwich Civic Center exclusively as a community and civic center, and opposes any effort by the Board of Selectmen or any other entity to use the Bentheim Western Greenwich Civic Center for municipal departments or offices.
Thank you. That being offered on behalf of one of our districts, it does not require a second. We'll take up the committee reports first, beginning with Pamela Frederick, Chair of our Finance Committee.
Thank you. This item was presented by Betsy Fruman, District 9 Chair, in a joint meeting with Land Use. The committee was strongly supportive of the sense of the meeting resolution and felt that the concept of placing social services in this building was poorly conceived and poorly communicated. Though supportive of the sense of the meeting resolution, the committee voted in opposition given the concern with its restrictive language, most specifically the use of the word exclusive in the now therefore clause. The committee felt that this building remains a town-owned property, which will involve significant construction costs as well as ongoing funding in support of operations. Just as with other contributions that the town accepts, including the Board of Ed donation in tonight's call, where the town clearly states that the contributors have no right of supervision or oversight, the town should maintain control. However, the committee believes that the town should use this control in a way that is beneficial, specifically to the project's intent, and more broadly, as it was the committee's concern, to the benefit of the citizens of the town as the future circumstances may require. Much like Old Greenwich Civic Center, which is often used for town purposes, the committee sought to remove any restrictive language from the sense of the meeting resolution. In this particular case, it was unfortunate that the town did not pursue alternatives and refinements of the project in a cooperative manner that could satisfy both the Glenville community and the town's needs. Instead, a fairly dogmatic stance was taken by the town. Depending on the outcome of the motion, the committee is prepared to submit a motion to amend the language to read, and if it's okay with moderator, I'll read it, to delete the word exclusive and replace the end of the sentence from the word opposes with the words endorses the concept of public-private partnership that made it possible. Concern was also expressed about several of the whereas clauses, but given that they have little effect, the committee chose not to amend these. The committee also questioned whether the town's verbal or other commitment was in any way legally binding. However, there were none present who could respond to that question. Thank you. The vote of the committee, oh, I'm sorry, should I give you the vote? The vote of the committee for the resolution in the call was 1-10-0 opposed. And if the amendment is presented and accepted, we voted 6-4-1 in favor as amended, with Districts 4 absent and District 9 abstaining.
All right. I just wanted to clarify, you do then intend to offer that amendment after we get the committee reports?
Right.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Isaacson, with the Health and Human Services Committee report.
Yes, Mr. Moderator. RTM members, we were fortunate because we had Donna Gaudioso-Zeal as a member of our committee, And as some of you who were there at the emergency meeting recall, she was certainly a key player in developing this resolution. The resolution, I think, as it stands now, is forward thinking, and that's good. I think it is not aimed at any particular department of the town moving to this Bentheim Western Civic Center, but rather an overall assessment that no town department should be in that building and this public-private association that they have. Our vote was 12-0-0.
Thank you. Franklin Bloomer with the report of our Land Use Committee.
As Ms. Frederick indicated, the Land Use Committee considered this item initially, or at least we received presentations jointly, the two committees together, Land Use and Finance. I'd like preliminarily to just note that that meeting took place in the Cone Conference Room because of a mix-up. The Cone Conference Room, which is the room that the Land Use Committee normally meets in, had been assigned to men's softball for the evening. And I would like to acknowledge and thank Joe Siciliano and the organizers of the town's men's softball program, who rejiggered their schedule so as to make the Cone Conference Room available to our two committees for the meeting on this item, and to 4 committees who met together on item 6. So thanks to those persons. This was presented to us, as Ms. Frederick indicated, by Betsy Fruman. It was put on the call, and I guess was drafted at a time when the movement consideration was being given to moving the Department of Social Services to the Bentheim Western Greenwich Civic Center. By the time of the meeting, the First Selectman had indicated that that was no longer under consideration. So the focus really was not on that proposed move, but on the resolution as drafted, and where there was concern among members of our committee that the resolution was too limiting. There was considerable sympathy for the District 9 position. The town had authorized a private group to go out and raise money for the use of this facility, to rehabilitate the facility for its use as a community and civic center. But there was never a writing in which the parameters of what could and could not be done with the building were set forth. The feeling was that the town was bound, but some uncertainty as to what the town was bound to, and the resolution part seemed even consistent with the whereas clauses in describing that scope. Our concern was reflected in our vote, which was 4 districts in favor, 5 districts opposed, with 2 districts abstaining, District 2 absent. Those voting against felt that the whereas clause was too inflexible, too restrictive, possibly giving more assurance than had initially been provided to those who sought the money. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Zarelli with the report of our Parks and Recreation Committee.
Betsy Fruman came before us last Tuesday, presented the resolution, answered all questions, and our conversation really was more towards the use as a community center for the Western Civic Center. So our committee voted in favor of the resolution as presented on the call, 11-0-1. The abstention was from District 8, who felt the resolution wasn't binding.
Thank you. Randall Huffman, Chair of our Budget Overview Committee.
Good evening. At our meeting of the Budget Overview Committee on March 2nd, at the request of our delegate from District 9, who'd been involved in the development of this resolution, we considered it. We voted 6-1-0 with 5 districts absent to take up the matter, and then following an extended discussion, we voted 7-0-0 to approve item 5 in light of the chilling effect that could occur on future public-private partnerships if the Board of Selectmen felt free to change the understanding pursuant to which private funds were raised to support a community project. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Clark, Secretary of the Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, the Legislative and Rules Committee met at 7:30 last Monday evening, March 6th, half an hour earlier than usual because of the time-consuming agenda before us. We first took up item 5, which, though not referred to us on the call, had been subsequently referred to our committee by the moderator. We heard from Betsy Fruman, who gave us some brief background and urged us to support the sense of the meeting resolution. We found item 5 to be in legal order by a vote of 9-0-0, with districts 1, 3, and 4 absent. I should note that anything that comes before the town meeting with 20 registered voters' signatures is essentially in legal order, and we so found. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fruman, Town Services Report.
Though this item was not referred to us, Town Services took this item up for two reasons. It was one of our District 9 member suggested we bring it up, and because it was my mom bringing it, I had to say yes. So everyone tell Mom I did well. After discussion, we voted 10-1-0 in favor of the item, with District 2 absent. The objection was due to the restrictive use of the word exclusively in the final paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Frederick with the Finance Committee motion.
The Finance Committee of the Town of Greenwich Representative Town Meeting moves to amend item number 5 by 1, striking the word exclusively from the resolution clause, 2, striking all words from opposes to the end of the resolution clause, and 3, adding endorses the concept of public-private partnerships that made it possible. The clause will then read, now therefore be it resolved that it is the sense of the meeting that the RTM endorses the original stated purpose of the Bentheim Western Greenwich Civic Center as a community and civic center, and endorses the concept of public-private partnerships that made it possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Because that motion to amend is offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. Discussion on the Finance Committee motion to amend. Ms. Fruman, District 9.
District 9 discussed this at our Thursday meeting, and we felt that we could not endorse this amendment. We just wanted to bring that to you to say we don't endorse the amendment. We feel that we're coming to you, the town, to do something that we really didn't do. We didn't have a contract. And we would like the town to say, this is what we thought, the town thought, was meant by this public-private partnership. That's why we've included the word exclusively, and why we hope you will continue with the language we presented.
Thank you. Further discussion on the Finance Committee motion to amend item 5. Irf Porter, District 6. I remind all speakers there is a 3-minute limit in effect.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would ask through you, Mr. Moderator, for clarification through Town Council as to what the implications are of this sense of the meeting resolution, though it may not be binding, in sending a signal to the Greenwich Civic Center Committee, which has been working for over a year, basically to find a means to upgrade the quality of that facility. And the first thing that's been done is to complete a residential survey to define the needs, and the organizational survey is within days of being completed. Once that's done, we move forward. And I just would like clarification on behalf of that committee and District 6 as to what the implications are. Thank you.
Well, He did direct that to you, Mr. Fox, but I don't know that you're a person to respond to that, but if you care to respond, or anyone else would care to respond to that comment?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I would be pleased to respond to the extent I can. A sense of the board resolution is particularly important to the body that puts it forward. The body that puts it forward wants it to be looked upon as an important concept, something that expresses their wishes, and something that they accept the body to whom it is directed to follow. However, I think, as you know, a sense of the board resolution is just that. As indicated by the prior speaker, it is not mandatory, it is not binding, it expresses the wish of the body that puts it forward.
That, well, that actually, that phraseology reminds me of another point I wanted to make. There, and if you don't mind if I digress very briefly, I have been asked to announce that a few weeks ago, Mr. Lash, Mr. Tessie, and I met over a glass orange juice to discuss some issues relating to the size of the RTM. And you'll see there's a particular reference to the fact that this is an RTM, a representative town meeting. So there was a mention of sense of the board. We are not a board. We are a town meeting modified. And we like to refer to these resolutions as sense of the meeting resolutions. So, Mr. Porter, do you have any further comments? Okay. That, by the way, that discussion that we had was taped by Paul Curtis and crew and has been running beginning last Thursday, and I was asked to announce the schedule. The next airing is Thursday at 8 o'clock, and it also runs Sunday at 8:30 a.m. and Sunday at 8 p.m. Okay. Thank you. Further discussion on the Finance Committee motion to amend. Okay. We will proceed to vote on it. Again, let me remind, we are not voting on item 5, on the merits of item 5. We are merely now voting whether to delete the word exclusively from the resolution clause, the last paragraph of this sense of the meeting resolution, and to delete the end of the, to delete from the word that begins opposes any effort through the end of that sentence and replace it with this phrase, endorses the concept of public/private partnerships that made it possible. That is all we are voting on now. Should we make that change to that last paragraph of the sense of the meeting resolution? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Finance Committee motion to amend item 5 and proceed to poll your delegation. So if you want to make that change, you vote yes. If you want to leave it as is, at least for now, you vote no. Now, we can continue. If there are other general comments members or guests would like to address to the sense of the meeting resolution, we can hear those. So further discussion on item 5. Chris von Keyserling, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and particularly the members of District 9. A number of years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I can't remember when this trip started, I sat in an auditorium in District 9 in that same very building, the old school building, and we had a discussion with Mr. Minnelli and all the school what to do about it and how there wasn't money and it was going to get torn, the boiler was going, and town didn't have money, was ended, and that was the beginning of this trip that District 9 said that follows the basic rule, if you want it done right, do it yourself. And I think District 9 has done a magnificent job of rallying their own neighborhood together to do this. This is their building. Yes, it is a town building, but it is their town building. I'm from Coscob, and I'm very jingoistic about Coscob. I consider that's where God lives, and the rest of you are here to protect us against the rest of the world. I'm very partial to Coscob. Coscob has its own peculiar problems. District 1 has its peculiar problems. District 3 has its peculiar problems, like the new, we haven't even started with the recycling center redo, and other things like that. We go around town, and every district has its personal problems, just for that district. We as a body have always been very careful in listening to what a district says when it's their particular concern, when it's a home question for them. You remember the old story about hanging together, hanging separately. The time will come when such a problem will visit your district. I would remind you to think very carefully now when you consider this resolution of ask a question, a gentle question from our colleagues in District 9 for our support in what is basically right and proper in the first place. I hope you will support the resolution.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 5. Mr. Tuthill, District 3.
Mr. Moderator, I would like to just point out to the fellow members here that this shouldn't have been a problem. If the town had had the right kind of contract, we would have understood this. The problem came about because the town put up, depending upon what the total cost comes out to be, somewhere a little more or a little bit less than half, and the community, primarily through Mr. Bentheim, the balance. We can't in any way take away from the fact that the community just worked themselves crazy to try to raise this money. At the same point in time, the town is putting up money. I think when it comes to the next project in Old Greenwich, we better make darn sure that we have a complete understanding like a business would. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 5? All right. We will await the results of the vote on the motion to amend so that we know what we are voting on. If there are any other districts whose vote is still outstanding, I ask that you expedite that, please, so that we can continue as quickly as possible. We have the result of the vote on the Finance Committee motion to amend item 5, the sense of the meeting resolution regarding the Western Greenwich Civic Center. Those in favor of the motion to amend, 96. Opposed, 80. Abstaining, 1. That motion has carried. So what is now before us is an amended sense of the meeting resolution. Further discussion on item number 5 as amended? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Item number 5 as amended, and please proceed to poll your delegation. The next item to come before us is item number 6. Alan Small of District 10.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen of the RTM. The item is as it appears on the call, with the now therefore resolved section saying, now therefore be it resolved, it is the sense of the meeting that the Greenwich RTM requests that under the provisions of Section 7-188 of the Connecticut General Statutes, the Board of Selectmen appoint a commission for the amendment of its charter, as required under the Home Rule Act after the passing of the 1975 voter referendum under 7-191. The topics to be considered for amending the charter are the items and language proposed for charter amendment from the June RTM meeting, of sewer assessment and payments, the creation of a Department of Parking Services, the creation of a town administrator position, the powers and duties of the first selectman, codification of the Department of Human Resources, and any other topics for proposed charter amendments as may properly come before the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 6 has been moved and seconded. We will begin with our Appointments Committee. Colleen Jenkins.
The Appointments Committee took up this item, and we met jointly with the Standing Committee on Social Services. 10 minutes we heard from Mr. Small, 10 minutes we heard from John Wayne Fox, the town attorney, and then we had 10 minutes of questions and answers, and later in the evening we voted on it. We voted 0 in favor, 7 against, and 3 abstentions. And to put it in a nutshell, we had 2 legal opinions saying that we, the RTM, can continue to do things the way we are doing it. So that is the basis of our vote of continuing as is and not supporting this document. Thank you.
Franklin Bloomer with the report of our Land Use Committee.
As Ms. Jenkins indicated, this is a sense of the meeting resolution relating to the procedure to be followed in amending the town charter, and it's before us by petition of 20 registered voters. It was presented to the Land Use, Education, Finance, and Legislative and Rules Committees in joint session. That session was chaired by Doug Wells, chair of the Legislative and Rules Committee. The presentation for the petitioners was made by Alan Small, one of the petitioners, and by his retained lawyer, James A. Fulton. And we also heard from Town Council Wayne Fox. The sense of the meeting resolution, which you've just heard read, would have the RTM request the Board of Selectmen initiate a charter amendment process different from that which is set forth in our charter. The process that we're asked to endorse is a procedure under the Connecticut General Statutes. The whereas clauses, which were not read this evening, justifies this request by reciting a highly technical argument to the effect that Greenwich inadvertently lost the benefit of the procedure set forth in the town charter. This argument is set forth at considerably greater length in a 10-page legal opinion by Mr. Fulton, which is included in the explanatory comments. The argument in brief is that by adopting a charter change by referendum in 1975, the town availed itself of the general statute provision, and in doing so lost the benefit of the special acts that underlie the charter provisions. In other words, Mr. Small and the argument that he endorses would have us essentially say in the sense of the meeting resolution that the procedures for amendment of our charter contained in the charter are invalid. Our town council, Mr. Fox, does not agree with this argument. Neither apparently did prior town council, since we've been continuing to adopt charter changes following the procedures in our charter since 1975. Mr. Small acknowledged that if his argument is correct, it would bring into question the validity of all charter changes adopted since 1975. Indeed, he had his attorney, Mr. Fulton, describe the steps the town might take to deal with this supposed problem. What are the differences between the two procedures? Under our charter, amendments must be initiated either by the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and must then be adopted by the RTM, in certain cases by a majority of the entire membership of the RTM, and in other cases by 2/3 of the entire membership. The more important changes then go to a referendum of the public. Under the procedure outlined in the general statutes, which the sense of the meeting resolution would have us approve, charter changes would be initiated by an independent charter revision commission. All proposed changes would then go to referendum. The RTM would have no role. Mr. Fox, in his presentation, did not respond in detail to the legal argument presented by the petitioners, but he did say that he did not agree with it. He stated that the town is in litigation with one or more of the petitioners and anticipates possible litigation over the same legal issues that are raised in the sense of the meeting resolution. And he did not wish to compromise the town's litigation posture by describing his legal analysis in public. In response to a question, Mr. Small described litigation he has conducted against the town over the last 6 years, seeking to overturn the building zone regulations relating to floor area ratio. Again, in response to a question, Mr. Small stated that he had voted against a charter change adopted by the RTM about 18 months ago relating to lot splits, eliminating the so-called free cut. But in response to questions, he declined to say whether or not he intended to or was considering commencing litigation challenging our charter change, nor would he commit not to commence such litigation. Following the joint meeting, the Land Use Committee discussed and then voted on item 6. The members of the committee were troubled by the fact that we were being asked to take a view on a fairly technical legal issue that was contrary to the existing town charter, contrary to town practice in amending our charter over the last 30 years, and contrary to the opinion of our town council. We were also concerned about how any action that the RTM took on this item could be used in litigation. We took 2 votes. On the resolution as in the call, we voted none in favor, 7 opposed, with 4 abstentions, and District 2 absent. Those who abstained did not wish to pass on the legal issue that the item presented. We then voted to offer a motion this evening as a committee to postpone this item indefinitely. The effect of that motion would be to dispose of the item without debating the legal issue or having to vote on the underlying merits of the resolution. That was adopted by a vote of 11 in favor, none opposed, with no abstentions, District 2 absent. At the conclusion of the committee reports, Mr. Moderator, I request that I be recognized to offer that motion on behalf of the Land Use Committee.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins?
Unfortunately, I misspoke about the vote of the Appointments Committee. The vote was 0 in favor, 9 against, not 7, and 3 abstentions.
Thank you. Pamela Frederick with the report of our Finance Committee.
Okay. As Mr. Bloomer stated, the Finance Committee met in a joint meeting, and this item was presented by Alan Small, RTM member from District 10. Small believes that the town ceded its Special Acts Charter Amendment rights and must follow the Home Rules Act in accordance with Chapter 99 of the Connecticut General Statutes, which Small indicated require all charter changes to be handled by a charter commission and then voted by referendum. Wayne Fox of the Town Law Department presented the opposing view. He expressed concern that Alan Small has an active lawsuit with the town and that Fox would therefore be cautious with his comments so as not to benefit Mr. Small's lawsuit. Mr. Fox also referred to a legal precedent in State v. Sloan, 1965, that indicated that the taking of one action does not dissolve other actions. He also stated that it would be a mistake to approve the sense of the meeting resolution, as it may put to question the RTM's right to change the charter, which right he indicated remains legal and valid. Many clarifying questions were asked, most of which neither party provided definitive answers. A number of points, in addition to those raised by Mr. Bloomer, include the fact that it was noted that under Small's argument, any minor charter change will require a referendum, which is illogical and surely not the intent of the statutes. Finally, we believe it's important to also note that both sides have argued to us that it is the first selectman that is charged with charter commission selections, when in fact, upon more detailed review of the general statutes per section 7-187A, it is the body empowered to make ordinances, or in the case of Greenwich, the RTM, that is the appointing authority. Upon reconvening, the committee voted unanimously in opposition to the sense of the meeting resolution with little further additional discussion. The vote was 0-11-0, opposed with District 4 absent. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Brady with the report of our Education Committee.
Good evening again. As noted earlier, the Education Committee met jointly with Finance, Land Use, and Legislative and Rules. I will not cover the discussion that took place in the joint session. When we adjourned to discuss the item and vote, we discussed both the substance of the resolution, in which we believed, the committee believed, that the RTM is capable, competent, and was in fact elected to deal with such items as are ostensibly being referred to a charter commission. We also were quite concerned with the packaging of the resolution. We felt it was about as cuddly as an angry porcupine. We didn't want to touch it. Consequently, we voted 0 in favor, 12 opposed, no abstentions to recommend this item.
Thank you. Randall Huffman, Chair of our Budget Overview Committee.
Good evening again. As I noted, BOC met on March the 2nd. We did address this issue because it had been referred to us. We did have Alan Small present, but we did not have representatives of the legal department. Since we did not have with us any update from the Legislative and Rules Committee, which had had this issue effectively before them for some months, nor did we have a legal position from the town attorney, the BOC voted 4-3-0 not to formally consider the proposed sense of the meeting resolution. We do feel, however, that this is an important issue that needs legal advice for resolution by the RTM. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Isaacson with the report of our Health and Human Services Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, I don't think it's necessary to go through and repeat what's already been said. As you heard, we did meet jointly with the Appointments Committee and then adjourned to our respective meeting rooms to consider it. The only one thing that I would add is that it was our understanding that Mr. Fox contends that the Validating Act of 1975 makes our present system of going through the RTM absolutely legal. Our vote was 2 for the sense of the meeting, 9 opposed, and 1, and that is actually a recusal. District 10's representative husband is a member of the law firm that drafted this resolution, and so she recused herself.
Thank you. Bill Clark, Secretary of the Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, members, for item 6, our committee adjourned to attend a joint meeting with Education, Land Use, and the Finance Committees. Our chairman, Doug Wells, chaired the session, which was defined as purely informative in nature. Only questions were permitted from the floor, and no opinions or arguments were allowed. Alan Small of District 10 presented the sense of the meeting resolution and provided additional informational handouts. His attorney, James Fulton, also assisted in the presentation. The crux of their presentation was that 168 of 169 towns in Connecticut now follow Chapter 99 Charter Amendment procedures, Greenwich being the only holdout. Further, while they believe that the town has had a legal basis for doing so until 1975, thanks in part to 2 enabling acts of the state legislature that gave retrospective approval to past irregularities by the town, they feel that legal basis ceased to exist when the town held a referendum under Chapter 99 in November of 1975. That referendum, which specifically mentioned Chapter 99 as its legal basis, created a full-time office of the first selectman. By having availed itself of Chapter 99 in that referendum, said Mr. Small and Mr. Fulton, the town was thenceforward no longer allowed to amend its charter by any other means. Town Attorney Wayne Fox stated his disagreement with this position. He stated that the enabling acts by the legislature of 1961 and 1975 were more than mere forgiveness for past irregularities, and in fact guaranteed the town the right to continue outside the scope of Chapter 99 for the indefinite future. Since these 2 enabling acts occurred prior to the November 1975 referendum, Mr. Small and Mr. Fulton took vigorous exception to this position, restating their understanding of state law that once such a referendum has taken place, only Chapter 99 can govern in the future. In defense of his position, Mr. Fox raised the specter of enormous amounts of potential litigation of the many amendments to the town charter during the past 30-plus years, if those amendments were deemed to be procedurally improper. He mentioned his meeting with the Legislative and Rules Committee at a special session in August, at which he promised to provide our committee with a definitive ruling on this whole issue. However, in response to a question from the floor, Mr. Fox stated that he would not put his opinion into writing because of the legal jeopardy that might attach to the town of Greenwich should he do so. Our committee then reconvened and heard further from both sides. Several members of our committee felt that if the town had been acting improperly for 30-plus years, it was time to put a stop to it here and now, rather than letting the situation drag out further into the future. Others, like our chairman, Doug Wells, were worried about the language found in the 3rd whereas clause specifically, and what he called the Pandora's box of potential litigation this might create. Clearly, we did not see any easy answers to the situation. We then took 2 votes, as is our custom, one on legal order and one on the merits. The vote on legal order was somewhat more complicated than usual because of the fact that 4 charter amendments had been referred to our committee by the June 2005 town meeting and were thus still under our purview. Some members felt that Mr. Small was jumping the gun by putting forth this sense of the meeting resolution before our committee had reported back to the RTM on the 4 prospective charter changes, and that thus the item was a cart before the horse situation, i.e. literally out of order. Other members believed, as we found unanimously for items 5 and later 7, that any sense of the meeting resolution is in legal order as long as it is accompanied by the signatures of 20 registered voters in accordance with our rules and procedures. Our vote was therefore split on the legal order, 2 in favor, 7 against, and 2 abstaining, with District 1 absent. We then took a second vote on the merits of the item. The vote reflected the issues as stated above and was 3 in favor, 7 against, and 1 abstention, District 1 absent. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Fruman with the report of our Town Services Committee.
Hi. Town Services met with Transportation and Parks and Rec on Tuesday to hear a presentation by Mr. Small. We then adjourned to our own room and voted 2 in favor, 9 against, and 0 abstentions against this item. The majority of the committee felt that this item was dangerous and would simply open a can of worms if allowed to proceed. The 2 votes in favor felt that this issue should be researched and resolved as soon as possible in order to clarify that if the town is proceeding correctly and legally in reference to charter changes. A motion was made and seconded to bring a committee-sponsored substitute resolution to the RTM. After working out suggested language, a vote was taken on the substitute resolution, and that item failed 2 in favor, 9 opposed, and 0 abstaining with District 2 absent. Basically, the substitute resolution read as follows. The Town Services Committee asked the moderator to appoint a Charter Oversight Committee, which shall convene no later than June 2006 and report back to the full RTM no later than December 2006. This committee shall be charged with reviewing and offering an opinion regarding the current manner in which the Town of Greenwich handles charter revisions and the rules associated with Chapter 99 Charter Revision Regulations. And again, that motion failed. Thank you.
Good thing that motion failed. I think that's what Legislative and Rules is doing, isn't it? Carol Zarilli, Chair of the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Parks and Rec met jointly with the Town Services and Transportation Committee. Mr. Small presented his resolution. Parks and Rec voted none in favor, 12 against, no abstentions.
Thank you. Mr. Kavee with the Public Works Committee report.
The Public Works Committee had a distinct take on this item. Item 6 is a resolution which requests that the RTM endorse an interpretation of the Connecticut General Statutes. Neither the opinion of the RTM nor a personal opinion by our town attorney should have any influence on the ultimate adjudication of this issue. The RTM is clearly unqualified to pass judgment on this complex legal issue. The Public Works Committee voted none in favor, none opposed, and 11 abstaining to unanimously pass on item 6.
Vince DeMarco, Chair of our Transportation Committee.
As mentioned, we had a joint committee along with Parks and Rec and Town Services on our regular meeting night to hear the presentation by Mr. Small, who happens to be our Vice Chairman and a delegate from District 10. He explained the resolution and answered questions. After the committees left us, we continued the discussion and proceeded to vote. With Districts 3 and 12 absent, the vote was 7 in favor, 2 against. With District 7 abstaining because we have not yet heard definitively from our Town Council. District 9 voted no also for the lack of a statement from Town Council and because the Legislative and Rules Committee had not yet responded back to the RTM on its opinion of the 4 prospective charter amendments referred back to it in June 2005. District 5 voted no in opposition to having all charter revisions addressed by a charter commission and enacted by referendum instead of by the RTM.
Mr. Bloomer, you're going to offer your committee's motion to postpone indefinitely.
Mr. Moderator, on behalf of the Land Use Committee, I move that this item be postponed indefinitely.
All right. Because that is offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. The motion to postpone indefinitely, I'll read from Robert's Rules so that we're all aware of what we're doing here. Motion to postpone indefinitely is a motion that the Assembly declined to take a position on the main question. Its adoption kills the main motion. Now, in effect, well, let's leave it at that. If you are in favor of postponing this indefinitely, you should vote yes. And if you want to continue discussing this tonight and taking it up tonight, you should vote no. Because this is in effect, this could kill the motion, we will take a recorded vote on this. So I ask the district, the motion is debatable, I'm sorry. The motion is debatable, and it requires a majority to pass. So discussion on the Land Use Committee motion to postpone indefinitely. Mr. Small, District 10. And you are the, I suppose, the principal opponent of this motion, so you do have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen of the RTM, I understand that this resolution generated quite a bit of controversy, and I can understand why. There's a certain amount of fear that was injected into the situation by 30 years of potential changes, but I believe that having looked at that 30 years and not providing any other solution or any other method to address this issue, that to then say, let's do another 10 years if we're doing things improperly, is not the way to do it. It should be hashed out. And I believe that charter amendments are a very serious issue, and that this body should be entitled to a legal opinion from a town attorney that we can debate, that we can understand, and that isn't a moving target, as I found in some of the meetings that we had. In terms of some of the motives that people have put towards this and it attributed to me, I would just say if those were true, I don't think I would be bringing this sense of the meeting resolution before you. It seems kind of absurd to me to say that I'm going to have some kind of gain or some kind of intent and then be bringing to the town a way to solve this and go forward in a positive manner. And that's really what this is trying to do. What this does is ask the Board of Selectmen to create a Charter Revision Commission and put it to referendum. And in your packets, there was quite a bit of information related to item 6. And I hope some of you took the time to look through it, because in there was a copy of this kind of dark document, which was registered with the town clerk and the Secretary of State for the referendum in 1975. And it stated right on its face that it was accomplished under Section 7191 of the General Statutes.
Oh, please state your point of order. All right, Mr. Klein, I neglected, excuse me, I have heard your point of order. I will rule that it is not well taken. I neglected to say that under Robert's rules, debate on a motion to postpone indefinitely may go to the merits of the underlying main motion. Mr. Small.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. The Chairman of Land Use indicated his opinion that this referendum was passed inadvertently. Our town attorney stated that he believed that this was a valid referendum. This was placed onto the ballot by officials of the town of Greenwich, recorded by the town clerk and certified by the Secretary of State. Valid referendum. The Connecticut General Statutes state, any municipality administering its local affairs under general statutes or special acts may continue to so administer its affairs until the electors of such municipality avail themselves of the provisions of this chapter. That happened in November 1975, after the June Validating Act. We talked a little bit last June, June of 2005, when these items were referred back to legislative and rules, about how the validating acts are basically when the town went before the state legislature seeking forgiveness for prior acts. Now, I know we all sat through, and I really appreciate people sitting through the meetings, and I learned a lot from the discussion. And so what I'd like to address is more of what was said by the town attorney and what we can learn from that. The town attorney did say he agreed that the referendum was valid in 1975. And on the first night of the meeting, he stated that the town has been protecting the ability of the RTM to amend its charter. That's a pretty broad blanket statement to be made in a verbal opinion with no backup. And when we went to Legislative and Rules, he was asked, what did he mean by that? And he said, well, Mr. Modeles, in 1975, stood before the legislature and preserved the town's rights to amend its charter. And if you read a little further into the packet of exhibits, the items, the entire discussion, the entire statement of Mr. Modeles before our legislature is in there. And he stated that the town was at that time looking to create a standing charter revision commission, and that the town would be very, very careful in the future to stay strictly within the bounds of Chapter 99. He stated this before the legislature to persuade them to give Greenwich forgiveness for its prior acts from 1961 to 75. Had there been any future action to either of the validating acts, there were two validating acts, one in 1961 and one in 1975. They're worded exactly the same. And had there been any prospective, any future action of those, as was claimed by the town attorney, we wouldn't have needed two. We would only need one. The legislature doesn't enact validating acts of legislation that are unneeded. They don't do that just to be nice to Greenwich. So after Mr. Modeles said that the town was going to be very, very careful to stay within the bounds of Chapter 99 because it recognized its responsibilities under Chapter 99, the town then enacted a referendum, this document, under Chapter 99. And I note that the town attorney, in the meetings on the second night, on Tuesday night, didn't mention that whole first section about how the town had been protecting the right of the RTM to amend its charter. Skipped right over that whole section and jumped right up to the Validating Act and said it was the Validating Act, as he said the first night, that allowed us the ability to go forward. But as we discussed before, the Validating Act has, and being from the legislature, the town attorney should know, has no prospective application. He said Monday night, Sloan 2 was the answer. But if you read further on in Sloan 2, you find that you can exercise home rule, but to do it, you have to use the Chapter 99 procedure. He also stated that he agreed with the opinions of the prior town attorneys. Mr. Modeles, before the legislature, stating that the town would abide by Chapter 99. Mr. McCauley in 1984, who stated that the town having used Chapter 99, and John Wetmore, as recently as 2002, who stated that the town should seek a validating act. As recently as 2002, the town should go seek forgiveness because the prior acts were believed to be incorrect. The town attorney, Mr. Fox, ended up cautioning us against taking up this resolution and using Chapter 99, because then if we did that now, from now forward, it would mean we'd have to continue to use Chapter 99 in a Charter Revision Commission. It was interesting to see that he recognized that fact, that from now on we would have to do that, and that's the way it should be done. But I don't see any difference in him recognizing it from today forward or from 1975 forward, when the Validating Act was in June and the referendum happened after that. So I believe either way, whether it was 1975 or today, if we use the Chapter 99 procedure, I believe that's what's required from now forward. So we're left with that the town attorney agreed that the Validating Act would be canceled out by the use of a referendum, a Charter Revision Commission, and a referendum, and he agreed that that referendum from 1975 was valid. Now, I know people in the RTM feel they may lose some power, but I think we also have to look at how is it best to enact charter amendments that are going to stick. That's the responsibility of this body. And I had people call me up that discuss this issue. And I had to hold the phone out here and listen, and I did. And I discussed the issue with people. One gentleman in particular, I really appreciated the discussion. We had quite a lively discussion. And at the end, I just asked him, please, I've mentioned quite a few items to you that came out of the packet. Could you just take a look through the packet?
1 minute.
He did that. And I was surprised because most people wouldn't, take the time because it is a pretty thick packet. And he actually took the time to call me back again, which most people probably wouldn't do. And the first thing he said to me was, "You're right." Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone indefinitely. Mr. Boutel, District 8, to be followed by Dr. Carlson, District 1. Limit is 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, I know that passing a motion to postpone indefinitely might seem the easiest way to dispose of this. And given the obvious sentiment of the town body reflected in our committee reports, were we not to postpone this item but vote on its merits, I think all of us know how that vote would go. Given that fact, Mr. Moderator, through you to the town attorney, we've already had some discussion tonight on the importance or lack thereof of sense of the meeting resolutions, but given that we fully anticipate one way or the other this point being litigated and ultimately being decided by a judge, I wonder what way of disposing of the item tonight is in the best interest of the town, given the position Mr. Fox has taken. Are we in a stronger position having this body postpone the item indefinitely, or are we in a stronger position having this town's legislative body overwhelmingly vote it down? So through you, to, Mr. Moderator, I would like an answer from the town attorney, which would be the preferable outcome in defense of litigation?
Mr. Fox.
Your moderator has already indicated to the body that a motion to postpone indefinitely is effectively an action which will kill the sense of the meeting resolution. So whether or not one votes it down in that manner or one votes on the substance and defeats it, I do not feel there would be a significant difference in how a court would view it at some future time.
Thank you. Dr. Carlson, District 1.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members of the RTM, we have to face the situation that it's quite possible that everything that Mr. Small has told us tonight is true and that he's right. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know the final answer, and I suppose the final answer will come from some judges. So I really don't think we can vote on the merits of this proposal. Postponing it indefinitely is the best way of handling it. However, in the case of this motion and these questions, I think they will be discussed subsequently, even if we postpone it indefinitely tonight. I can imagine it could come up again before us in some form, but it really is best handled by highly qualified lawyers and perhaps even better by judges. And I must say that I don't see anything wrong with Mr. Small's reasoning, and I must commend him for the work that he's done. But tonight, I think we're better off if we postpone this indefinitely. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to postpone indefinitely? Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? Land Use Committee motion to postpone item 6 indefinitely, and proceed to poll your delegation. I have the results of the vote on item number 5 as amended, the sense of the meeting resolution regarding the Western Greenwich Civic Center. Those in favor, 167, opposed 10, abstaining 1. That item has carried. Now, everyone understand, well, we will need to await the results of the pending vote before we can proceed. We need to know if item 6 is still before us. I would like to thank, once again, the efforts of our volunteers who bring us such fine programming on our community television, Channel 79, of course led by Paul Curtis of District 9. Tonight, assisting Paul, John Motet on the camera up front. And Jenny Larkin is in the back on the control panel. Thank you very much. Wonderful service you provide.
Peter.
We have the result of the vote on the Land Use Committee motion to postpone item 6 indefinitely. Those in favor, 141, opposed, 29, abstaining 5. That motion has carried. We have now disposed of item 6. Item 7 now comes before us. Paul Curtis with that resolution.
Mr. Moderator, item 7 is as it appears on the call.
All right, would you care to just briefly summarize what it's about for our viewing audience, for your viewing audience?
This is a sense of the meeting resolution to institute some guidelines on the capital improvement process.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 7 has been moved and seconded. Bob Brady with the report of our Education Committee.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, members and guests. The Education Committee met last Monday evening to consider item 7. Prior to the meeting, we had invited a member of the Select Board to attend. No one chose to, so we were without assistance from that direction. We discussed this item among ourselves. The general tone of the discussion is that the target is correct. The Education Committee believes that the RTM has a problem in dealing with the CIP. But that we are not addressing a CIP in terms of its implications effectively. This proposal we felt was insufficient. It does not do the job that needs to be done, and that we need to. The consensus of the committee is that we need to deal with the CIP in a fashion different from our existing committee structure, perhaps a separate committee or something else. To that end, what the committee decided is that we would ask the RTM moderator to appoint a special committee to consider a rule change that would in effect change the way the RTM deals with the CIP. Several of us have different ideas about how to approach this, and that's not the point of the discussion now. But we did believe that do believe that a special committee to develop changes to our own rules and organization is the approach needed to get the RTM in a position to get its arms around the CIP and its implications. So, that request of you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you.
Of the resolution as presented, we voted 1 in favor, 10 opposed, with 1 abstention. Thank you.
Pamela Frederick with the report of our Finance Committee.
Okay. The item was presented to the Finance Committee by Paul Curtis of District 9. He indicated that this was submitted as a starting point to begin defining a process to improve the CIP. He also indicated that the only request coming from this motion is to have the RTM receive a preliminary list of projects in the September call. He noted that because the CIP does not have enough checks and balances, the intent was to allow the RTM to voice guidance after a project has been appropriated. It was not to have the RTM approve or reject project continuance. The committee was informed that the BOC was working on a process whereby they would add more detail and develop a more specific process. Rick Kroll, from Chair of District 8, provided a dissenting opinion and expressed concern that this is poorly crafted and bad legislation that does not accomplish much more than already exists. He offered that the municipal improvement process is a much stronger tool that would then require further RTM approval of a project. The committee concluded that it would be better to prepare a very clear process, such as Bob Brady presented tonight, and then to return the item to the RTM. The committee voted 2-8-1 opposed. District 4 was absent, and District 2 abstained. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Clark, with the report of our Legislative and Rules Committee.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, item 7 was presented by media mogul Paul Curtis of District 9, who acknowledged that he was not yet happy with some of the language. An amendment to paragraph 3 was proposed by Karen Fasilitis, an alternate for District 7, and at the appropriate time, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to propose that in paragraph 3, the third word read will, instead of will substitute put forth. The RTM, I'm sorry, instead of approve. First sentence of paragraph 3, the amendment will be, the RTM will put forth a sense of the meeting resolution rather than approve a sense of the meeting resolution. And I'd like to make that motion on behalf of the committee at the appropriate time. That amendment by Ms. Fasilitis was adopted by unanimous consent. We also heard from Rick Kroll of District 8, who believed that the item was superfluous and that the RTM already has the power to oversee CIP projects, but had not been diligent in doing so in recent instances. We again took 2 votes. The first on legal order was 11-0-0, District 1 absent, and the second vote was on the merits, 8-3-0, District 1 absent.
Thank you. Mr. Kavee with the report of our Public Works Committee.
The discussion of the resolution in item 7 centered on a debate between 2 guests, proponent Paul Curtis and opponent Rick Kroll. I would hope we would hear from both tonight. The RTM Public Works Committee voted 3 in favor, 6 opposed, and 2 abstentions. The 3 districts in favor were 1, 4, and 7. The 6 districts opposed were 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, and 11. Districts 2 and 12 abstained, and District 9 was absent. 3-6-2.
Mr. Huffman with the report of our Budget Overview Committee.
The Budget Overview Committee also took up this matter at its meeting on March the 2nd. While the BOC noted the sincere effort set forth in this resolution to advance the CIP review process by the RTM, the committee felt that we should expand the proposed sense of the meeting resolution. Accordingly, we will move to amend the resolution to add an additional paragraph at the appropriate time to set forth a more complete step for developing a process for our review of these projects.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Mr. Moderator, on behalf of the Legislative and Rules Committee, we moved that the third numbered paragraph be changed to read, the RTM will put forth a sense of the meeting resolution rather than the RTM will approve a sense of the meeting resolution. And I give you that motion on behalf of our committee.
Thank you. Because that is a motion to amend offered on behalf of one of our committees, it does not require a second. The motion is to delete the word approve in the 3rd paragraph and of the final paragraph of this resolution and insert in its place put forth. So it would read, the RTM will put forth a sense of the meeting resolution. Discussion on the motion to amend. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion is carried. Mr. Huffman.
The BOC proposes to add to the existing sense of the meeting resolution a final numbered paragraph 4 to read as follows. I think many of you have seen copies of the text. The moderator is requested to create a special committee made up of RTM members with appropriate expertise in major capital projects, building, or construction management, whose first order of business will be to develop the actual process for RTM review of projects on the CIP list, including checkpoints for periodic review by the RTM of ongoing projects.
All right. Mr. Huffman, do I understand the effect of your amendment, if it were to be adopted, that you would want the moderator, that your committee is asking the moderator to appoint a special committee that would, in essence, do what Mr. Curtis's resolution has attempted to do?
It would, in our view, take the resolution a step further to actually set up a process with guidelines for establishing the review that the earlier portions of the resolution commit the RTM to as a matter of principle.
Okay. Since this is requesting the moderator to take some action, is everyone familiar with the proposed amendment? Do we need to read it again? All right, I will read it again. This is a motion to amend the pending sense of the meeting resolution to add a fourth paragraph in the resolved portion. And it would read, the moderator is requested to create a special committee made up of RTM members with appropriate expertise in major capital projects, building or construction management, whose first order of business will be to develop the actual process for RTM review of projects on the CIP list, including checkpoints for periodic review by the RTM of ongoing projects. All right, discussion on that motion to amend item 7. Mr. Detchen, District 10.
My concern about this amendment is that it seems to mix two different concepts into one resolution. It seems to me there's one thing for the RTM to have some sort of a voice on what should be on the CIP and how the decisions are made to what project should go onto that list. It's another to have the RTM reviewing periodically a specific project once it's begun, almost as if the RTM were a construction manager. I think that's beyond our capabilities.
Further discussion on the pending motion to amend item 7. Mr. Von Kaiserling, District 8.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. I would support this amendment, and I would support the kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, the motion itself, the whole sense of the meeting as amended. This just gets the process going. All we're asking today is for somebody to come forward with a process by which we can manage this idea of CIP. It's something which has frustrated us greatly in the last year particularly, and I think we feel unmatched to be able to fulfill our responsibilities. This would allow us to take care of our own business and get our own house in order so that we can properly work with the selectmen and the BET to fulfill our duty of looking after the town assets as its supervisor and its fiduciary responsibility. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion to amend. Joan Caldwell, District 10.
Mr. Moderator, it seems to me as though this resolution comes to us because of the confusion and the sense that we were caught up in a stream of energy that we couldn't stop, we couldn't divert, we couldn't slow down, and that had to do with the public safety complex. And it's probably a legitimate concern, but what bothers me is that yes, we want a say as to what is put on the capital improvement list. I personally am very concerned that it is very shortly about to become a wish list that the taxpayers are going to have to pay for much longer than I or they want. But there's a difference between trying to determine what should be on that list and the order in which it should be on that list, and looking at an ongoing spreadsheet of costs as an individual project goes along. The key word that I heard from the previous speaker was manage. I'm not in the management business. I'm in the decision business. I'm here speaking for my taxpayer constituents who say, no, I don't want this project, but I do need that one. And once that's approved, then as an individual representative in this body, I will deal with the ongoing cost as part of the budgetary process with the BET, the First Selectman, and anybody else's door I have to knock on. But I'm not in the management business, and I don't think any of you want to be.
Further discussion on the BOC motion to amend item 7. Mr. Crowell, District 8.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, fellow members. I think the intent of both the amendment and the sense of the meeting has been well received and has woken up a lot of people as to the process and what lies ahead of us. However, in speaking to what's before us right now as to the amendment, I think the amendment does have merit, and I think the ability to create a special committee to develop a procedure or look at how this body can further enhance the way we look at the capital projects would be well served. Unfortunately, if it was tied to the sense of the meeting, which you heard from our subcommittees and a number of you heard from me earlier, I think that sense of the meeting falls short. And as we'd heard earlier, it's non-binding. So as much as this amendment unto itself may hold some merit, I would like to see it come back as a separate recommendation, not as one amending the current sense of the meeting resolution. So that being said, I think we need to potentially, and through you, Mr. Moderator, have to understand this. If we turn down this amendment to the sense of the meeting, could we then bring it up as a separate item?
Tonight?
Yes, sir.
The answer to that is we could. It's not an item on our agenda, but there is a provision in Freedom of Information that would allow us to take up a non-agenda item if we first voted by a two-thirds majority to do so. So I would allow it if that were to take place. All right. Further discussion on the motion to amend item 7. Mr. Porter, District 6.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I stand against not only the amendment, but the amendment to the proposed change. And the reason is very simple. I think it's redundant. If there are skills in this body that need to be marshaled in order to better understand the CIP process, to better understand what the town's plans are that impact our constituents, those people should be marshaled. If, to steal a message from a corporate environment, if you have problems with a department or a division and you're the leader, you say, you need some help, tell me what kind of help you need, and I'll get it for you. And if you don't think you need help, I'm telling you that you need help, so I'll help you get it no matter what. And in that context, the skills are there, the committee system is set, and I leave it basically at the feet of the Budget Overview Committee to be the vehicle through which those resources are marshaled. And therefore, I suggest that you vote against the amendment and against the main proposal. Thank you.
Further discussion on the BOC motion to amend item 7. Mr. Huffman?
The comments that we received, I think, lead me to seek to clarify a little bit about where we've been, where we are, and I hope where we're going. This, we believe, because we've experienced it, has been an evolutionary process and will continue to be an evolutionary process. Let's recall that over the last couple of years now, as the CIP process has developed, the historic process of independent project review by the RTM, even on major capital projects committing us to millions and millions of dollars, has not gone forward with an explicit review, timely review on many projects. This is an effort, without stepping on the toes of any particular jurisdictional committee of the RTM, to move us toward a process that gets back to a timely, project-focused review of projects as they are proposed, as they are put into the CIP, as they are approximated as to cost, and then as they are developed into formal projects with an explicit budget, so that at the appropriate times, the RTM is looking at a project at a time at which it can say we don't have enough information, or this is a good idea, or this is appropriate up to a certain point in dollar cost, and then to review if there are significant changes in a project, in its scope, or in its cost. The RTM is at an appropriate point with a review process in hand to say, no, this is not the project that we were looking at, and the proposal now as to either scope or cost is not appropriate, and we do not approve further funding of this project. On the basis that this will be an evolving process, I urge you to support this amendment and move us one step further in the process that we have outlined. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to amend? All right. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards? BOC motion to amend item 7 and proceed to pull your delegation. Okay. While we are voting, now, I'm sorry, what we are voting on is whether to add the language that I read to you regarding the moderator being requested to create a special committee. We're not voting on item 7. Do we add that language requesting that a special committee be appointed, be added to item 7? So that is, if you want that paragraph in there, you vote yes. If you do not, you vote no. We will now continue with discussion on item 7 as a whole. Mr. Curtis?
Mr. Moderator, members of town meeting, ladies and gentlemen, the sense of the meeting resolution that is before us has been put forth by our own membership. The petitions that were required to bring this resolution to the RTM were signed by 35 members of the RTM, not the general public. The petitioners, having read the resolution in its original form, saw merit in codifying the RTM's involvement in the new capital improvement process. The rules of the RTM detail how each of the standing committees will review and report on the town's budget. Included in those rules are a timeline covering the responsibilities of each of the standing committee's budget reviews and how those reviews are reported to the body of the RTM. The new capital improvement process, however, has introduced wrinkles in the process that did not exist when those rules were written and amended. As we members of the RTM have seen, there is a level of frustration with respect to the RTM roles as trustees of the town's infrastructure under the new capital improvement process. As there are no rules that pertain to the CIP, the members of the RTM have sometimes been at a loss to define their role, exactly what their role is in this process. Some RTM members feel that they cannot reasonably fulfill their responsibilities as the 230 elected representatives of the citizens. However, After attending the RTM committee meetings last week, I can honestly say the purpose of the resolution has been accomplished. The discussion in each of the committee meetings highlighted the perceived gaps in the RTM's current budget process. These discussions also highlighted several mechanisms the RTM already has at hand to engage in the meaningful stewardship of the town's infrastructure and capital needs. Even with the tools the RTM already has, several committees and members of the RTM had enlightening suggestions on how to clarify our role in the CIP. The Education Committee, as you heard from Mr. Brady, suggested a standing committee. Mr. Kroll of District 8 mentioned the municipal improvement as a tool that we already have to manage and help the RTM as a body make decisions on capital improvement. Other members of the RTM have suggested specific criteria to select projects for review and stewardship. All of these suggestions and discussions have fostered a meaningful examination of the RTM's participation in the capital improvement process. The Budget Overview Committee's amendment to this resolution continues these discussions in the context of a specifically appointed committee. This committee will return to the body eventually, recommendation, and we as a body have the opportunity to accept or reject whatever process that committee comes up with. Lastly, the RTM is not acting alone in their desire to balance the capital needs of the town. In an email sent to me, Mr. Gomo, the town administrator, stated, I quote, "The resolution follows the commitment we made last year to keep the RTM and the public informed of the CIP plan and subsequent projects through public meetings and hearings. The CIP committee will work with whatever procedures the RTM establishes to implement the intent of the resolution. We are anxious to work with the RTM for a better and earlier understanding of planned capital projects and the future impact on the town finances and infrastructure." Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 7. Arlene Lamazzo, District 6.
First, let me thank Paul Curtis for putting this on the agenda, regardless of how this vote goes. I think he has begun a very important discussion that we all need to take very seriously. I first heard of the need for more RTM involvement in the CIP program from Mr. Brady. And when he broached it to me, saying we need, and he put it in terms of a special committee, to stay with the CIP process not only in May and June when we approve the budget, but to follow it all through the year as it evolves, not only during that year, but in successive years. I know that for the projects I've put forward to DPW over the past 25 years, I have often gone back after the project was finished to find out what did it cost, what were the problems, and that information is forthcoming. So I guess I have a slightly different take on this, and I have mentioned it in my district. I have mentioned it in the Finance Committee just before I left the Finance Committee, and I'm not sure I mentioned it DPW, although I have mentioned it to several of you. We do need an ongoing oversight group, I'm calling it. I'm not even calling it a committee, that would monitor the CIP program, not so that we can stonewall it or turn it down, but just so that we would monitor it, so that we know where the projects are in the funnel. You know, what's been started, how far is it going along, is it on target budgetarily? And if we follow these projects one by one, maybe 10 at a time, I think we'd have to, we would have a better handle on what's going on in this program. And I don't see it as something that we need to necessarily manage, as Joan put it, but sort of an oversight process. But I am told when I broach it to Mr. Lash and to Mr. Byrne that we already have the mechanism to do this. And we do it by going to each one of our standing committees who have projects in the pipeline and taking a member or two from each of those committees and forming some sort of subcommittee. The Budget Overview Committee has its charge to look at each annual budget and to analyze it. That's not that's not my concept, and I don't think it's Mr. Brady's concept either. We need something ongoing from year to year that will actually follow the projects, follow the money, it's not for us to say it should or shouldn't be, it's to say we need the information, we want to know what's going on, we want to know how it's going, we want to know where it's going. So with that in mind, I think we need to think about this some more. I'm going to vote no to the amendment. I'm going to vote no to the resolution that is before you. But I'm not voting no to the idea that we need something, and we should all be working and thinking about what is it we need, and maybe with guidance from the Selectmen, the Board of Selectmen, from the BET, from Mr. Byrne, we'll form some sort of group that can do this. But it will be a very long-term project, so if you sign on to it, you're going to be there for a few years. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion to amend? I'm sorry, hold on. I have the results of the vote on the motion to amend. This is to add the request to create a special committee. Those in favor, 74. Opposed, 85. Abstaining, 3. The amendment has failed. The item now is before us as it was on our call. Further discussion on item 7. Mr. Boutel, District 8.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members, I guess I'm going into my 16th year as a member of this body, and I just want to say that the amount of information we get today has gotten much better. I was the member of this body who stood before you last May and moved to cut the money for the public safety facility. And I did so at the time because I felt we didn't know enough about the project. I will commend the first selectman and the group he put together on the building committee on putting together a presentation which, had it occurred prior to the budget vote, I never would have gotten up. As part of your budget document, which we get well ahead of time, there is a long-term capital plan in there. So we know most of the projects that are coming. We also have a process for input. I would point out that when the current CIP cycle began, I believe it was in September or October of last year, the first selectman held a meeting in the Cone Room that was packed, including probably a third of this body. So to suggest that we are not involved in the CIP process, I think is inaccurate. On a couple of the items we've discussed tonight, I've been a little disturbed as an older member of the body that Mr. Kavee on an earlier point said we weren't qualified to do something. I've heard other members suggest on other points that we aren't qualified to do things. It's our job. You have the budget document we're going to vote on in May. You are provided, and as I understand it, the way it's working in this cycle, it's going to go beyond 10 years for the capital plan. You're being provided with the proposed financing structure for that capital plan. We are being provided with more information than we have ever been provided. What Mr. Porter made comment before, Arlene Lamazzo made the comment, I would just echo. As an RTM member, it is your responsibility to really dig into that document. Don't just look at what might come before your committee. Look at what will come before the other committees. If you are concerned about capital projects in this town, spend the time looking at the document. Town officials are willing to answer your questions. I don't necessarily believe that this amendment is necessary if we do our jobs.
Further discussion on item 7. Mr. von Keyserling.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. I'm somewhat perplexed. Seems to me, just a few months ago, this body was in quite an uproar. We had our Budget Overview Committee pitted with a sense of the meeting resolution that had this whole body at 6s and 7s. We have a CIP plan which was developed properly to handle a huge infrastructure deficit that we had in this town. Our first selectman very gently explained to us how we'd let things go on our infrastructure. We'd bonded against the future by putting off repairs. We hadn't done our sewer work. We hadn't done a lot of DPW things that we should have done, and we had to do them. This list now is approaching $500 million. $500 million in capital projects. We have somewhere, probably, I would imagine, if it's 90 this year, we must have a few hundred projects of $10, $15 million. Sizable projects. Maybe we have the public safety, $70 million. $20, $30 million is not unusual. These are large projects, and yet they're all DPW projects. And under the charter, DPW projects don't require a building committee. DPW projects are overseen by the first selectman in the DPW. This is their job to do alone. It's a big burden. I say that with a certain cynicism. We were confused. We were upset. We were troubled. And now I hear tonight, well, there's really no problem. It's just that we're lazy, we're slobs, we don't do our job. All the stuff is there. You've got the tools, for heaven's sakes. Just get off your duff and do something. Well, gosh, that's nice. Now I'm happy. It's much easier to be an RTM member. I just need somebody to get up and do a dance for us. And now I feel better. Think how you felt 2 months ago. We turned down the sense of the meeting resolution in our committees for the BOC. We were at much pains in thinking about that, but we were not relieved when we turned down that sense of meeting and it was withdrawn. We still had the lingering question of dealing with it. I'm not talking about the problems of the first selectman. I'm not talking about the BET. They're doing their job. They're home sleeping right now, as a matter of fact, right? And we're still here. I'm talking about us doing our job. Yes, it would be nice if everybody in this body, all 230 people, got up and did their homework, went down to town hall at least once a week, and try to figure and ferret out all the information that many of us have tried to get for years and years and years, have difficulty getting.
30 seconds.
So it's so easy for us to get this information. We can go to somebody else's public hearing and speak our hearts out. And it's up to them whether they want to accept it or not. When it comes to us on our call, it is our business. We control it, we own it, and we are the trustees. It is our job. If we don't have a proper system, even if you want to use the system that's already there, I think it's about time we put together a committee to delineate exactly how we go about it so we're all on the same page and we don't have 238 ants running around crazy. Thank you.
Further discussion on item 7. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards item number 7 and proceed to poll your delegation. The next item to come before us is item 15. Peter Crumbine, our selectman.
Item 15, resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of Nathaniel Witherell Board for a term expiring March 31st, 09, Ronald B. Dreskin. It is as in your call.
Thank you. Will a member please move the adoption of the resolution? Resolution on item 15 has been moved and seconded. Colleen Jenkins with the report of our Appointments Committee.
The Appointments Committee on item 15 voted 12-0-0. He is an absolutely outstanding candidate. This should have been a consent item. Thank you.
Mr. Isaacson with the report of the Health and Human Services Committee.
Yes. The Health and Human Services Committee had a little trouble scheduling with Mr. Dreskin, and I agree that otherwise it would have been on the consent calendar. We did meet tonight before this RTM meeting, and I agree with what Ms. Jenkins said. He's an outstanding person. He's had 2 years as chairman of the Nathaniel Witherell Board, 15 years in his own consulting firm. Our vote was 11-0-0, and District 3 was absent at the time we took the vote.
Thank you. Discussion on item 15. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item 15, and proceed to poll your delegation? That brings us to item 22. May we have the resolution on item 22, the nomination of Ann Drake. Mr. Crumbine, are you presenting that?
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Board of Social Services for a term expiring March 31st, 2009. Ann Drake, it is as in your call.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 22 has been moved and seconded. Colleen Jenkins with the report of our Appointments Committee.
Item 22, Ann Drake. The Appointments Committee interviewed Ann Drake on February 28th. The interview lasted an hour and a half. Ann Drake is the current co-chair of the Board of Social Services. She has previously served 1 term on the board in 1997. The interview delved into 5 areas of which the nominee is responsible as co-chair of the Department of Social Services. The discussion items were, first, the proposed move of the Department of Social Services from Town Hall to the Western Community Center in Glenville. 2, the discontinuation of the Friendly Visitors Service by the Department of Social Services and its transfer to the Family Center, an independent organization. 3, the potential discontinuation of the after-school program at the Byram Archibald Neighborhood Center and its potential relocation to the Boys and Girls Club in Central Greenwich. 4, the reorganization of the Department of Social Services based on the consultant's report of June 2005 by the consulting firm of Brody Weiser and Burns. 5th, the hiring of the new commissioner of the Department of Social Services. The Appointments Committee dealt with these 5 areas because they are activities that are happening on the watch of Ms. Drake. Although a long history exists concerning each one of these areas, the Appointments Committee dealt with current decisions and behaviors for which the nominee is in part responsible. It would be unfair to hold her responsible for past histories. Number 1, the move of the Department of Social Services from its current location at Town Hall to the Western Civic Center. The Appointments Committee was interested in the board's decision-making process regarding this item. After all, moving a department is a major decision. It's not like evaluating the addition or subtraction of one town vehicle to a department, for instance. When asked about her role in the decision-making process, Ms. Drake explained that in mid-January, on the way out of a private meeting in the Selectman's office, she was informed that the move of the department was under consideration. The Appointments Committee commenced a line of inquiry about the chair's reaction to the proposal. Ms. Drake replied, and I quote, "I cannot defy the first selectman." Another quote, "If the selectman tells us to do something, we must do it." As a follow-up question, the delegate from District 2, a professional social worker, asked, "How many walk-ins does the Department of Social Services have at Town Hall?" her professional assumption was that the department kept intake statistics. Ms. Drake replied, quote, "I don't have a clue." The delegate from District 7 asked a basic statistic about the department. How many people does the department serve? Ms. Drake replied, I quote, "I don't have that statistic." During the interview, Ms. Drake volunteered another important fact about the decision-making process regarding the move of the department. She informed us that at the regularly scheduled monthly meeting of the Board of Social Services, from which she had just arrived on February 28th, she was told by the town manager that the move of the department was off the table. Ms. Drake said the news was conveyed to her as she was leaving the executive session of the board meeting. Looking back over the period that the move of the department was on the table, that's approximately 7 weeks, Ms. Drake informed us that the Board of Social Services had not convened any meetings, regular or extra. This remark gave us the impression the board had not met to independently evaluate the merits or the impact of the move on its clients or the town. Furthermore, it is clear the board, in the eyes and the ears of the general public, remains silent on this important issue. The delegate from District 9 pointed out this behavior raised a leadership question. The delegate's expectation of good leadership is that one gets out in front of an issue, especially if one is co-chair of a board. The next topic was the discontinuation of the Friendly Visitors Program by the Department of Social Services. Ms. Drake described the intent of the Board of Social Services to review all programs provided by the department and to look for redundancy of services. She reasoned if the department is providing a service that another organization in the town of Greenwich provides and can do a better job, then the department will discontinue its program. The delegate from District 8 brought up the Friendly Visitor Program, which was recently discontinued by the department and transferred to the Family Center, an independent community organization. As background, Friendly Visitors is a one-to-one visitation program which on the surface sounds friendly, very friendly, but in substance provides a system of monitoring the frail and elderly citizens in our town who are living independently at home. Basically, volunteers visit the individuals and report back to the part-time caseworker if and when the individuals need additional help. So it's a way of communicating need back to the department. It's a basically a volunteer program. Since this program was discontinued, according to the delegate from District 8, there has been a 50% attrition rate in the program. The attrition rate includes a decline in volunteers as well as the people who receive the visits. Ms. Drake did not deny or confirm the statistic of 50%. She said that the program was in a transition period, and during transition, things happen. She did not mention any active follow-up monitoring by the board after the service was discontinued. She left the impression that the department had effectively moved the program out of the department, the board had eliminated duplication of services, and could account to the taxpayers for a savings of tax dollars. The next line of questioning centered on the discontinuation of the after-school program in Byram Archibald Center and its possible relocation to the Boys and Girls Club in Central Greenwich. This line of questioning was commenced by the delegate from District 4. The delegate bluntly said, and I quote, "The community I represent, Byram, is up in arms over this idea." Ms. Drake replied that they, the board, were analyzing everything and were concerned about balancing the needs of taxpayers with those of social service clients. She said as co-chair, she had met with the board of directors of the Boys and Girls Club to discuss the move. She had invited other board members to attend, but none attended that meeting. She said from the meeting she learned a lot. As background information, she pointed out the after-school program currently costs $80,000 a year, and that if moved to the Boys and Girls Club, the department may provide a social worker. This discussion ended with the impression that the discontinuation of the Byram after-school program is still on the table. Furthermore, if discontinued, the act would be consistent with the board's current agenda to discontinue social service programs that other organizations in Greenwich can do better. The next area of questioning centered on the consultant's report from June 2005. This report, which cost $75,000, was done by a consulting firm of Brody, Weiser, and Burns. In general, many of the Appointments Committee members questioned the quality of the report. The report looks like a PowerPoint presentation. It consists of 60 pages, which, by the way, averages $1,000 a page. On the average, there are 3 to 4 skeletal sentences on a page. There's no footnoting of sources. There's no appendix that includes the consultant's methodology, their studies, their survey results. Ms. Drake informed us that we had the entire report. It is not a PowerPoint presentation. We also learned from her that the board had not requested the report, but it was requested by the first selectman. She did say that the Department of Social Services received and paid the bill for the report. Once again, we are left to wonder about the leadership and the independence of the board. More time was spent on discussing the implementation of the recommendations of the report. A major recommendation is to reorganize the departments into a team approach, whereby clients would be divided into 3 groups: adults, seniors, and family. Actually, nobody in the room was convincingly sure of these 3 groups. But essentially the philosophy is that all skills of the department will be found in each one of these 3 teams. That is, one client will be served by one social worker backed up by a team. The delegate from District 5 asked about the status of the implementation of the new organization. Ms. Drake said the department was moving ahead with the hiring of team leaders. The delegate's follow-up question is, why is the reorganization moving ahead now when the department is on the cusp of hiring a new commissioner within a couple of months? The delegate wondered if it were more prudent to wait for the new commissioner to come on board so he or she could have a say in the reorganization plan before it was implemented, particularly through hiring of the team leaders. Behind this suggestion was the delegate's realization that, by Ms. Drake's own admission, the staff of the social services is already experiencing very low morale. The discussion continued on the procedure of hiring the new commissioner. Ms. Drake explained Ms. Drake's explanation of the hiring procedure was fuzzy. She was unsure if the board made the final decision or the first selectman. The next set of general comments concerned a few budgetary comments. These were made by the delegate from District 6. She asked why the board is keen on cutting, for instance, an $80,000 after-school program or a $30,000 for a part-time social worker to run a voluntary program of friendly visitors. She pointed out that the social service budget is less than 1% of the total town budget. Yes, the budget of social services is about $3 million of a $365 million budget. That's less than 1%. She felt it peculiar the town can afford a $65 million public safety building and not $100,000 to continue 2 successful programs run by the Department of Social Services. Where is the voice of advocacy? In conclusion, after an hour-and-a-half interview of Ann Drake, who sits in an important leadership position on this Board of Social Services, the Appointments Committee voted on her nomination to a new term. The vote was 1 in favor and 11 against. The delegate from District 1 voted in support of her nomination because of her deep dedication and because she is methodical. The other 11 delegates voted against her nomination for a variety of reasons which covered the gamut. Most of these negative votes were because, first, she showed a low sensitivity for the people she served. Second, she did not seem to have a good grasp of how the department or the board functions. And third, she seemed to lack independence from the selectman, allowing him to make decisions the board should be making. In closing, I thank you for your patience in listening to this exceptionally long report. As chair, I took extensive notes during the interview, and I tried my utmost to reflect the discussion accurately. I have intentionally not abbreviated this report because appointments members, committee members, are acting as mouthpieces for people in need. Many of these people we serve cannot come here tonight to be heard by you, for you to hear them. The town charter tells us who these people are. They are minors, they are the mentally ill, they are the indigent, and incapable persons. Instead, tonight, I hope we have given them a voice and acted in their best interest. Once again, our vote was 1 in favor and 11 against. Thank you.
All right. Before we get the next report, let me report the vote on item 7, which was the sense of the meeting resolution regarding the CIP process. Those in favor, 92, opposed, 68, abstaining 4. That item is carried. Mr. Isaacson with the Health and Human Services report on item 22.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, fellow RTM members. Excuse me. We met with Ms. Drake on Tuesday evening with a very full audience. The majority of the speakers spoke in favor of Ms. Drake's reappointment. They included Judge David Hopper, who chaired a committee with Ms. Drake as the vice chair. Further, Bob Richardson spoke of her many contributions. Mrs. Geismar, who is the immediate past co-chair of the Board of Social Services, not only spoke very favorably about Ms. Drake's contributions to the board, but also told us that many of the controversial items being attributed to Ms. Drake were really initiated while she and Mr. Booth were the co-chairs. We also heard from Dr. Turk, who is the present co-chair with Ms. Drake, and spoke of her passion for the department and their teamwork in trying to change a department that has had identified problems for several years. Speaking in opposition were Nick Edwards and Christine Edwards, And it should be noted that Mr. Edwards is an employee of the Department of Social Services. Our Health and Human Services vote was 6 in favor, 5 opposed, and 1 abstained.
Thank you. Discussion on item 22. Dr. Russell Turk, co-chair of the Board of Social Services.
Thank you. I come here tonight to support Ann Drake's reappointment to the Board of Social Services for a number of reasons. I feel that in no way do I have time to address all the issues that were brought up to you by the Appointments Committee, but I can say don't agree with their assessment of all of them. I've worked with Ann since being appointed to the board myself roughly 2 years ago, along with Diane Fox, who is also up for appointment tonight. We come from opposite ends of the political spectrum and at times have had very differing views on the department programs and social service administration in general. But at all times, our work, both amongst each other and with the other board members, has been cordial, professional, and over the last 2 years, a very young group of board members have learned to work well together. Currently, there is one other board member with more experience than Ms. Fox, Ms. Drake, and myself, and just a short amount of more board experience. Ms. Drake's loss to the board, and I feel to the department at this juncture, would be a critical brain loss of understanding of the complexities of the department. I agree with some of the speakers' comments tonight that Ms. Drake is very passionate about both the programs of the department as well as the clients that they serve. I feel she has been professional. I feel that the many difficult issues that the board has faced from day one of Ann and I's appointment to it have been very difficult, have been a learning process, and we've tried our best. And I feel that at this point, her loss would be much more of a detriment to the department than a gain in a new board member. Thank you.
Thank you. Val Storms? Ms. Jenkins, we do not have that voting card. Oh, okay.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't realize that I would be enjoying a night out here quite so soon again. I am here tonight, though, to support Ann Drake's nomination for the Board of Social Services. I will give you my perspective on this candidate, this board, and this department, and it's the long view, both backward and forward. As a former chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, as a former liaison from the BET to the Department of Social Services, and as last term's chairman of the BET's Budget Committee, I have for a long time been in a position to observe the workings of this department and its board. The road has been bumpy there, and it has taken years for the people involved to find a clear direction to go in. As you know, there have been 2 studies, and more than one board has struggled with their implementation. From the beginning of Ann's association with the Social Services Board, and this goes back some years to her first service there, she has understood better than almost anyone else what the board's responsibility is and what the department's mission should be. She has the experience that gives her the perspective and a vantage point that nobody else on the board has right now. It is the board's job to consider carefully the recommendations of the study. It would leave itself open to criticism if it did not. The board will take into account in the course of that process the desires of the community as well as other factors. With Ann as its elected co-chairman, it has proceeded properly and will make no final decisions without sensible deliberation. If you turn down this nomination, you will deprive the board of a person with judgment, experience, and interest in serving this area of community life, of someone who has her board behind her and is willing to put in the large amounts of time it takes to do this job. If you turn down this nomination, you will set back progress for a department that sorely needs to move forward if it's to perform its function for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on item 22. Mr. Edwards, District 8.
Point of information, usually it's customary that in their committee reports that the negatives are given some voice. Is that still appropriate to ask for Health and Human Services? Because there are 2 votes against, and there was no discussion by Mr. Isaacson about what was said.
Mr. Edwards, I'm recognizing you. If you would like to comment, Mr. Isaacson is in charge of the report for the committee. So,
okay. First off, my name is Nick Edwards. I'm a representative from District 8. I also have had the honor of being a member of the Department of Social Services since December 1992. I'd like to compliment the RTM this evening for fulfilling a very major recommendation that was made in a report that needs to have a little bit more detail, but their conclusions, after very extensive interviews with staff and board, came up with on page 43, which we've begun tonight, the following, which I think it's instructive. It says, request that the first selectman nominate board members, not member, but members, who have knowledge of the social work field. I'd like to commend the body tonight for starting that process by approving Mrs. Mary Hike to the board as somebody who's knowledgeable. It is interesting to me that the board, when the RTM, when they've looked at other board appointments, for instance, like Mr. Pop, felt that it was really important, even if he could only attend 50% of the sessions and recuse himself, his expertise was really important. We've seen this in the Department of Health, the Board of Health, to have knowledgeable people. Here is a very great opportunity that we have this evening to allow this opening to be used where $114,000 worth of effort went in to make that one of the that recommendation. And so I encourage you to look at what's the need of the board. I don't deny Mr. Turk and his points of view and other people talking about Ms. Drake, but the question is, what is the need? The department has struggled. Right now, there's been about $500,000 I calculated, and we are right now in chaos. What we need is good, effective, professionally based leadership, and that really requires people, this next board position, to really come from within the field. So rather than get into some kind of sword fight about the shortcomings or the attributes of Ms. Drake, she, I'm sure, will gladly find an opportunity to volunteer in a meaningful way in the town of Greenwich. But I'd ask you to consider, what is the need of the board? Right now we're charting the progress for the future, and it really does need somebody who has the qualifications like Mrs. Hike, who can help educate the board. It's a very new and young board. They really need a lot of guidance. There's some very serious mistakes that seem to be made. One last point.
30 seconds.
One last point is, as an RTM member, I canvassed the staff of the Department of Social Service and asked one question: do you support the nomination of Ms. Drake? Over 150 years of experience in the town of Greenwich Department of Social Services said that they do not support that nomination.
Further discussion on item 22? Mr. Dudakis, District 1.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. I rise this evening to urge the reappointment of Ann Drake to the Board of Social Services. As leaders of our town government, we know what is going on. We know there are issues in the Department of Social Services. We know the department must look at different ways to do their business, and that's going to involve some change. But we also know that change is scary because of the uncertainty that it creates. Change scares the public who receive the services from the department, and it also scares the employees who work in the department. But that fear is not a reason for us in government to stop trying to do better and to look at the best way to provide these services, even if it is not the government. We must always empower our managers and independent boards to challenge the status quo by looking at new and better ways to do things. It doesn't mean change is going to happen, but it does mean that change must be considered. And because Greenwich government is also a democracy, the input of the people is a critical element to this process. That is exactly what is happening under Ann Drake's leadership. So as this board responsibly goes about formulating possible changes and putting them forth for community consideration, don't we owe it to our citizens to make sure we have the very best people on the board? Ann Drake epitomizes the very best that Greenwich has to offer. She is a citizen volunteer who brings to us a wide breadth of experience in social services, in human resource administration, in business, in government, in community service, in the things that this board needs desperately. It's been a tough few weeks for Ms. Drake, but she's persevering. She still wants to serve because she cares about Greenwich, she cares about the department, and most importantly, she cares passionately about the people she serves and the department serves. Ann is looking for ways to make social services delivery in Greenwich better, soliciting community comment, and then with the board and the public, make decisions. And because I know Ann, I know she's going to agonize about it, but in the end, she's going to lead us to the right decision.
30 seconds.
Isn't that what we want from someone on this board? Can we really ask for any more or any less? When we last appointed Ann, almost unanimously, she was an outstanding candidate. She is still an outstanding candidate. We need Ann Drake on the Board of Social Services, so please vote yes on this nomination.
Further discussion on item 22. Mr. Richardson, District 10.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, the reappointment of Ann Drake, who was elected co-chair of the Board of Social Services less than 4 months ago, has become a contentious issue in contrast, as Ed Dudakis has just noted, her June 2004 appointment, when we voted for a margin of 183 votes, more than the number of people who have voted here on all the issues tonight. There are a few reasons for the change in the atmosphere. 2 are neighborhood issues. They are the future use of the Western Greenwich Civic Center and the future existence of the after-school program at the Byram Archibald Neighborhood Center. Both issues have caused legitimate concern. Members who want to see the Glenville Center used only for community purposes, and I am among those members, should find satisfaction in our vote on item 5 tonight. For the record,
Ann Drake was not responsible for the proposal which necessitated item 5. Members who want to see the bank program continued, and I am one of those members, should be willing to trust the 7 members of the Board of Social Services whom we have appointed to make such decisions after gathering the facts and hearing the community's views. Ann Drake is just one member of the board, but her point of view, just like those of her other colleagues, deserves to be heard, and even if it's different from what my point of view is. 2 other issues are involved. One is the apparent differences between some former members of the board and current members, which differences have been attributed to Ann. This is essentially a non-issue because when we appoint people, we expect the successor members of any board to bring their own perspectives to bear on the matters facing them and to thrash out their differences with their colleagues in a collegial way without having to look over their shoulders. The remaining issue is the effort, ongoing for about a year now, to persuade us that professional credentials as a social worker are not just desirable but should be mandatory in practice for service on this board. That effort has resulted in contentious deliberations, unnecessarily so, I believe, over the nominations of Kimberly Terrenois last April and Shirley Jankowicz last September, both of whom were in fact appointed. To me, that effort, which is continuing here tonight, has been destructive and misguided. It should be rejected out of hand. Finally, there is our nominee, Ann Drake. As a human being, she may have an occasional fault, like the rest of us, but she is able, she is prudent, she is compellingly aware of the challenges facing the board and the department, and she does care. She cares about having a functioning operation that can deliver worthwhile and genuinely needed services to approximately 2,000 families in our town, which the department serves. Ann deserves a fair vote which this body can give her. Please join me in voting for her replacement, her reappointment, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Dr. Carlson, District 1.
Mr. Moderator, fellow members of the RTM, I am here to give you a minority report of the Appointments Committee. I watched the interview and I participated in it. I was somewhat sympathetic to Ann Drake at the beginning. I was even more so at the end. Ann Drake sat there for about an hour and a half and had vigorous questioning brought before her. She answered the questions with wonderful honesty, and she expanded on some of those answers. They were fairly thorough, and some of the gist of the answers were perhaps not favorable to her immediate case. But there was that wonderful integrity, a clarity. I had the feeling that any issue that would come before social services would be greatly helped by that clarity that I saw before me that night. I would also like to suggest to you that if you now send Ann Drake back to Social Services Board, you will get the best job out of her that she has ever done. This criticism has not been easy for her, but as a former college teacher, I would like to suggest that it's probably of high pedagogical value. I don't think you should throw away a person who can make a very fine contribution and who has also that very fine and beautiful integrity. Thank you.
Ms. Morton? Susan Morton Elliott, District 7, to be followed by Peter Scher, District 12.
Yes, I'm Susan Elliott, and I am the District 7 representative to the Appointments Committee. And I feel compelled to get up here tonight to clarify what I consider some misconceptions people have concerning, number one, our committee, and number two, Ms. Drake. First, I'd like to address Mrs. Storm's statement that Ms. Drake has the most in-depth knowledge, I believe she said, of the mission of the Board of Social Services. Well, she was asked that question directly at our committee inquiry, and her answer was that she hadn't read the mission lately, but that she felt her purpose was fiscal allocation and finding a new commissioner and program evaluation. I think after an hour and a half, one reason the vote was such a no-confidence vote was because we heard nothing from her about the people. The Appointments Committee has a mission also, and an obligation to you, the RTM, to evaluate and nominate candidates that come before us. You know, it's the only time this body has a chance to look carefully at the board and commission selections. We take our job seriously. This past month alone, we approved 29 candidates totaling over 350 votes. Exclusive of our no confidence vote for Ms. Drake, only 3 negative votes were cast. 2 weeks ago when Ms. Drake came before us, we greeted her heartily and without preconceived opinions. Why would we, when less than 2 years ago, we overwhelmingly endorsed her appointment based on her impressive resume and dedicated volunteerism? She certainly has that on paper. Our vote this time was not based on her resume, but on her performance over these past 2 years on this committee. In my 6 years on appointments, I cannot remember ever casting such an overwhelmingly vote of no confidence for any incumbent. I assure you that despite what's been said here tonight, our vote was not emotionally driven by recent neighborhood issues in Byram and Glenville.
30 seconds.
I believe a yes vote on this item is a vote for harsh cost-cutting without sufficient forethought to the frail, less fortunate, and elderly who cannot mobilize or legislate loudly enough on their own behalf. They need more careful consideration than appears to us to have been given them by this candidate.
Thank you. Peter Scher, District 12, to be followed by Lucy Krasner, District 5.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, members of the RTM. Many of you don't know me. I'm new to the RTM. I'm also had the good fortune to be appointed or selected by my delegation to be new to appointments. As a matter of fact, the evening that Ms. Turk came before the Appointments Committee was my first evening. I'm sorry, Ms. Drake came before the committee was my first evening on the Appointments Committee. So it was quite interesting that a lot of what we've been discussing went on. I appreciate very much the comments of Mrs. Storm, Dr. Turk, and Mr. Didakis. I'm fairly certain that they know Ms. Drake much better than I do. But I wanted to be certain that you understood the consideration that I had, and I would ask you to share the same consideration. I believe this decision that we're making this evening, we are also making a decision, given the way that the Board of Social Services is outlined in the charter, that we are essentially making a decision to have Ms. Drake potentially be the co-chair of this committee again. And for the reasons that our appointments chair outlined, I think there are some questions that we need to consider quite carefully about Ms. Drake's capability to be the leader of the Board of Social Services. I'm very convinced from her interview that she's very committed to social services, regardless of what her point of view may be about how programs should be delivered to residents of the town of Greenwich. Whether you believe that that's being done properly or improperly, in my mind, is not the decision before us. It's very clear that she wants the job, and it's very clear that she's knowledgeable in some aspects of what goes on in social services. I don't take issue with that at all. However, I would ask that you think carefully about the vote that you're making, and we are potentially making a vote to have her be in the leadership of the board again, and it's for that reason that, unfortunately, with great thought, consternation, I cannot vote in support of Ms. Drake.
Lucy Krasner, District 5.
Good evening, Lucy Krasner, District 5. I was not actually going to get up and speak, although I did vote against her and our committee, until I heard some of the comments in her favor tonight, specifically from Dr. Carlson in regarding her clarity. She was not clear at all. She was not knowledgeable as to the people that they were serving. She was not knowledgeable on the mission, so I think the clarity is just a pretty word. I would also point out that I do believe that Mr. Dodakis, and it was in reference to also Judge Hopper, thought she was wonderful. These two people know her in entirely different focuses. They know her in an area that I'm not going to say, but it's certainly not through social services. They know her in a different area. And I think that that's critical for us to be aware of. Our chairman actually asked us to write out our comments about 5 different sentences so that she could make her very clear report to you. And I would like to read my very few sentences. It's quite brief. I voted against Ann Drake because she seemed very uninformed about the Department of Social Services, in that she did not know how many people are served and whether they came into the office or were seen at their homes. In addition, she was ill-informed on the decision-making process for a new Commissioner of Social Services. Does the first selectman decide, or does her board decide? The process of hiring team leaders for the department before a new commissioner was hired seems particularly unwise and not well thought out. The idea of moving the Byram Archibald after-school program to the Boys and Girls Club, and it was my understanding that this was done without discussion with the local district participants, seems completely misguided. Of course, not holding a board meeting as soon as she heard of the possible move of the Department of Social Services to Glenville was also a bad decision, in my opinion. I believe that our discussion with Ann Drake was one of the most careful, in-depth discussions we have ever had with any candidate, and after careful consideration, I voted against her.
Further discussion on item 22. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item 22, and proceed to poll your delegation. Item 23, I have the results of the vote on item 15, which is the nomination of Ronald Dreskin to the Nathaniel Witherell Board. Those in favor, 158. Opposed, 2. Abstaining, 0. That item has carried. Item 23 now comes before us. Mr. Crumbine.
Resolved that the following named person nominated by the Board of Selectmen be appointed a member of the Board of Social Services for a term expiring March 31st, 2009, Diane C. Fox. The item is as in your call.
Thank you. Will the member please move the adoption of the resolution? The resolution on item 23 has been moved and seconded. Colleen Jenkins with the report of the Appointments Committee.
The nominee is actually Diane Chiapetta Fox, and that might be helpful because so you don't confuse her with Diane Fox, the town planner. These are two different people. Diane Chiapetta Fox is a relatively new member on the Board of Social Services. She has served only 2 years and is obviously working hard to come up to speed. The most interesting question during the interview was asked by the delegate from District 12. You heard about him from him tonight. He is the newest member to our Appointments Committee. On his own volition, the delegate has done his homework by downloading and reading the town charter's definition of the Board of Social Services. He asked the candidate if she had read it, and if so, to comment on her duties. Ms. Fox said that she had skimmed it and believed her duties as a board member were to hire the commissioner and work on the department's budget. The delegate had a follow-up comment, and that was to point out that the board's responsibility was also to make policy. He felt the omission was major. In general, the appointments members acknowledged that Ms. Fox had a professional background as a teacher who has in fact done team teaching. You know, if the Department of Social Services is leaning towards team work, perhaps that her teaching background would be useful. She's also had a lot of community experience useful to the issues around Board of Social Services. As well, we recognize she's still in a learning curve after only 2 years of service on the board. Our vote was 5 in favor, 2 against, and 5 abstentions.
Before I get the next report, I may not have given the vote on item 2, which was the LIUNA contract. Those in favor, 173. Opposed, 2. Abstaining, 2. That item has carried. Mr. Isaacson, with the report on item 23 for the Health and Human Services Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Health and Human Services Committee met with Diane Giappetta-Fox. As has been stated, she has been on the board for the past 2 years. She's a former RTM member, and she also, by coincidence, served on the Health and Human Services Committee as an RTM member. She's been very involved as a board member in examining social service programs as to cost-benefit analyses, and this was done at the request of the BET. Our vote was 12-0-0.
Thank you. Discussion on item 23. Will the district chairs please mark your voting cards, item 23, and proceed to poll your delegation? There being no further business to come before us, that being the last of the separate items, we will need to, I'm sorry, Ms. Jenkins, item 13 was withdrawn. The selectmen will bring it back at a later date. So that is the last item to come before us. The votes on item 22 and 23 are pending. I ask the district chairs to please expedite that voting. So we will await those results before adjourning the meeting. We have the results of the vote on item, excuse me. We have the results of the vote on item 22, the nomination of Ann Drake to the Board of Social Services. Those in favor, 40. Opposed, 107. Abstaining, 10. That item has failed. We have the result of the vote on item 23, the nomination of Diane Giappetta-Fox to be a member of the Board of Social Services. Those in favor, 134, opposed 8, abstaining 1. That item has carried. There being no further business to come before the meeting, and absent objection, this meeting is now adjourned upon unanimous consent. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home.